Good afternoon, honourable members. I'll start by reading the prayer and then the acknowledgement of country. Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee to vouchsafe thy blessing upon this assembly. Direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of thy glory and the true welfare of the people of the Northern Territory. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. We acknowledge the 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙑𝘼𝙉 people, the traditional Aboriginal owners of the land on which this assembly meets. We also acknowledge the traditional owners of all the sacred lands we represent and thank them for their custodianship of country. We pay our respects to all traditional owners and their cultures, to elders past and present, and any elders who may be here today. Please be seated. Point of order. Member for Arafura.
Madam Speaker, I move that the member for Daly be granted leave of absence from the chamber today because of personal reasons.
Member for Brennan.
Madam Speaker, I move that the member for Berkeley be granted a leave of absence from the chamber today as he is very unwell.
Okay. Is leave granted for the member for Daly? All in favour say aye. Is leave granted for the member for Berkeley? All of those in favour say aye. Leave is granted for both members. Honourable members, I have received message number 7 from His Honour, the Administrator, notifying assent to the bills passed in the May meetings of the Assembly. The message is dated the 10th of June 2025. I'll take this opportunity, members, to draw your attention to the gallery. I have my nephew, Bill Horton, with us this afternoon. Bill is a Territorian born in Katherine, and he's come to visit me this weekend. Welcome to Parliament House, Bill. The clerk will read the order of the day.
Government Business Order of the Day number 1, standing in the name of Mr Yan, the Appropriation 2025-2026 Bill 2025 Serial 25 and the Revenue Legislation Amendment Bill 2025 Serial 26, consideration of the expenditure proposed and report of the Estimates Committee pursuant to the Assembly's resolution of 14 May 2025.
Honourable members, pursuant to the resolution of the Assembly on the 14th of May 2025, following the tabling of the Estimates Committee report, the Assembly will have before it the question that the expenditure proposed in the Appropriation 2025-2026 Bill 2025 Serial 25 stand as printed, and that the report of the Estimates Committee be noted. The following time limits apply to the debate on the committee's report. Ministers, Leader of Opposition and Shadow Ministers 20 minutes, any other members 10 minutes, and the maximum period for consideration shall be 5 hours. There are no extensions of time. If the debate is not concluded after 5 hours, the question will be put without further debate. I call the Chair of the Estimates Committee, the member for Drysdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I table the Estimates Committee report and associated minutes of proceedings. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to table the report of Estimates Committee and associated minutes of proceedings on its consideration of estimates of proposed expenditure contained in the schedule to the Appropriation Bill 2025-26, the Revenue Legislation Amendment Bill 2025, and the activities, performance, practices and financial management of the Power and Water Corporation, 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝘀𝙑 Energy and Territory Generation. Madam Speaker, this is the Legislative Assembly's 24th year of estimates hearings. The estimates process provides a valuable opportunity for members to ask ministers questions relating to agencies and programs being funded under the budget. The hearings worked effectively and provided members an opportunity to ask questions about any area of government. I thank members for the way they conducted themselves during the hearings and for allowing each other time to get their questions of most interest. The committee's report outlines the key lines of questioning that arose throughout the course of the hearings. Madam Speaker, during the hearings, there were 134 questions that were taken on notice by ministers. Of these, 28 were answered during the course of the hearings. The questions and answers have been uploaded to the committee's webpage. I note that outstanding answers to the questions taken on notice must be received by the committee secretariat by the 14th of July 2025. Answers will be uploaded to the committee's webpage as they are received. Answers that are not received by the due date cannot be accepted or published by the committee. Madam Speaker, I thank all ministers and the board chairs for assisting the committee with their answers. I also thank the many agency staff who spent much time preparing information for the hearings, including those agencies that the committee did not get to within the allocated time. I know there is many long days and nights spent preparing, and this comes at the expense of one's personal time and time with family. This time sacrifice is noted and appreciated. I also thank the many staff who supported the committee's hearings in various ways. And Madam Speaker, on a personal note, I'd like to thank this chamber for the immense honour it was to chair this estimates. The chair is granted large powers through the estimates process, and like all things with that comes a great responsibility, and I hope that on all sides of this chamber feel I gave them a fair and just treatment, and that, to me, I wanted to ensure that accountability was held to ministers, whilst ensuring ministers had a fair proceedings for them to answer their questions. I was very happy with the conduct across all sides, and I think this goes a long way in ensuring the integrity of this House and this chamber. Madam Speaker, I commend the Estimates Committee report to the Assembly, and I thank all those involved throughout the process. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Deputy Speaker will now take the chair for the debate and consideration in detail.
The question is that the expenditure proposed in the Appropriation Bill 2025-2026, Bill 2-2025, Serial 25, stand as printed, and that the report of the Estimates Committee be noted. Are there any speakers? Member Farrah-Furra.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. As this budget bill passes through the House, I rise to speak with deep concern and disappointment, especially for my electorate of Arafura. This budget is not planned for the future for fellow Northern Territorians. It is a roadmap for neglect, and nothing over the last 2 weeks of estimates has changed this. It abandons remote communities, breaks promise to fellow Territorians, and slashes investment in services that our people rely on every day. Let's start with my electorate of Arafura. The CLP has taken a chainsaw to projects in my electorate. In 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝘀𝙑𝘼𝙉𝙍, the $20 million health centre and morgue is gone. This wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was about cultural appropriate healthcare, dental and x-ray service, renal support and a morgue, so families who are cut off in the wet season can honour their loved ones. All of it scrapped, and not even a phone call or a visit to the local leaders. I asked the Treasurer, how will you justify denying basic health services to this remote community? Is this the new policy of the CLP, that remote Aboriginal communities shouldn't expect the same quality of care as you get in town? And the funding for 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝘀𝙑𝘼𝙉 overlights cut, something basic and symbolic of community pride, was deleted from the books. Sorry kids, no footy, no underlight footy. Deputy Speaker, the $24 million shelter in Manuel has been cut, cyclone shelter has been cut. in one of the most cyclone-prone parts of the territory. Families in the largest community in the country have been left exposed. When the next cyclone hits and families have nowhere safe to go, will the CLP take responsibility? You're taking a calculated risk with people's lives, something you would never do in the urban centres. I acknowledge the funding for the remote police infrastructure at Manuel Police Station, a Labor project you are progressing. But on the other hand, you've cut off the Manuel security patrol. I've spoken about this before, Deputy Speaker, but the pulling of the funding for local security services is devastating for Manuel. And this government seems like it does not care. The Chief Minister has told residents that there wasn't enough money to go around. What she fails to mention was only if you are from a remote community. For 2 years, the Manuel Progress Association and anti-government co-funded private security patrols. These patrols prevented break-ins and kept families safe. Just weeks ago, a car was set alight outside a home. Crime is rising, but the rug is getting pulled out from under the community. 8 police officers can't be everywhere at once, especially with a community of 4,000. And security patrols have filled the gap. What good is future funding when your cuts of crime in these communities are hurting today? Deputy Speaker, the CLP has ripped 50 million from 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝘀𝙑𝘼𝙉 transition plan. This wasn't just about roads or buildings, it was a partnership, a promise to transform the post-mining future of the entire region. Did anybody consult with the Mirarr people, the traditional owners, the 𝙍𝙬𝙈𝙼𝙆, Aboriginal Corporation? Or was this another decision that was made behind closed doors, without warning to the people who fought for this vision? At the last sittings, the Treasurer said in this place that he'd travel to Jabiru with me. Well, mate, let's do it. I will be sending a letter just to lock in some dates and letting the people know. In housing, they've slashed Aboriginal employment target from 40% to 30%. That's work ripped out of locals' hands. Work helping to build skills, create jobs, and empower people in communities like the ones I represent. And while we are on the housing, what about the remote housing bills? When Labor left government, we had 260 houses in the last reporting period. Under this government, just 160. Nowhere near the target set with Commonwealth. Meanwhile, overcrowding gets worse and families are left waiting. And funding for transport in Arafura, nothing. Millions have been cut from transport planning and delivery output, while communities are left isolated and struggling for basic connectivity. Deputy Speaker, the government also slashed over 4 million from Aboriginal justice. Those opposite tells us that they are committed to Aboriginal Justice Agreement, but cutting funding to law and justice groups are key to keeping people out of jail and giving young people a chance. Evidence shows that alternatives to custody work, but you're reducing that funding for that. I know the Attorney General hasn't visited a single community, remote community, but I invite her now to come to Manuel and meet with the Namalaya Law and Justice Group, which is changing lives and diverting young people from crime. They would love to see a minister from this government and explain what their priorities are and why are the cuts happening. There's also 3 million cut from the Carlin Aboriginal Compound commemorative site. As a Tiwi man, I know the pain of stolen generation. This project was about dignity, truth, and respect, about healing the past. Cutting this is more than a budget decision. It's a removal of history and a slap in the face to every family tied to that place, to that site. How can you reassure the friends of Carlin or anyone focused on reconciliation that your government takes these stories seriously? They've broken their promises on Aboriginal ranger groups. by cutting grants, undermining the vital work of the Arafura electorate ranger groups Bawinanga, Gangi, Mudbalk, Nanyma, Tiwi, Wartekin, Warnby, and Kenby Rangers. They will all be worse off. This is devastating for environmental management, local jobs, and cultural heritage. Deputy Speaker, we have also seen the budget for early childhood education drop by almost $5 million. Early education is one of the most powerful ways to prevent crime and build stronger future. Yet they are ripping money out of it. There's also cut for upgrades in homeland learning centres where kids are already learning in demandables and cracked floors and no cooling. What message are we sending? Does their education matter less or because of where they live? Deputy Speaker, wherever the CLP sees a remote Aboriginal or bush community, they see a place to cut, not a place to invest. This budget is not just bad policy, it weakens our communities, abandons our children and our elders, erases our history, and puts lives at risk. It's not responsible governance, and it's regional neglect. This budget may pass this House today, but its consequences will be felt for years beyond these walls. In Gunbalanya, in Jabiru, Mananguita, Tiwi, and across West Arnhem, people will feel their cuts in their homes, in their health, and in their safety, and in their future. The people of Arafura and the people of the bush deserve better. The territory deserves better, and the opposition will keep fighting. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Member for Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, in the chamber, what a week. I was there for every hour of the 60 hours of estimates. And I want to say, first of all, my gratitude to everyone who worked so hard. Most of us on the Estimates Committee were new not only to estimates but also to Parliament, and the, as always, incredible support of the DLA staff got us through. The amount of work that you do is often invisible, but we all see it and we all know how imperative it is. And a special mention to our hard-working chair. I think I speak on behalf of all of us when I say we appreciated your clear and fair chairing of the sessions. And thank you to fellow committee members and MLAs, and of course to the amazing public servants who worked incredibly hard to prepare for estimates. I'm sorry that so many of you didn't get the opportunity to answer questions that you had prepared about the work that you do. Estimates is the only formal opportunity we have every year to ask detailed questions about how every dollar is spent and hopefully to get some real answers. At its core, Estimates is about accountability to the people of the Northern Territory. And for anyone who thinks Estimates is boring, I'm here to tell you that it's not. If you listen hard, there's so much to learn, both in what is said and what is not said. Behind each line item is a decision that affects real people, real communities, and real outcomes in health, in education, in infrastructure, and in every part of our lives here in the Northern Territory. And that's one of the things that makes this process so important. And we only have 60 hours every year to do this. Last year, I watched Estimates, all of Estimates, for the first time, and I said, how can that possibly be enough time? And now, having been in it, I can tell you, even though it does feel like a long time when you're there in the room, it's not enough, not even close. We're trying to examine the entire budget of the Northern Territory in that limited window. There's no other forum in this Parliament that allows for line-by-line interrogation of spending decisions. The public deserves better than rushed questioning and constrained time limits. And because we only have 60 hours, that means every minute matters. And when ministers give opening statements, sometimes for longer than 30 minutes, when members of government ask questions about their electorate, questions that could easily have been asked in a briefing directly to their minister, when ministers choose to answer questions through long, drawn-out and sometimes repetitive answers, and when members of both parties use it for political point scoring, that means we all lose out. Estimates is not a time for campaigning, it's a public accountability mechanism. And the structure of the hearings also places unnecessary strain on everyone involved, on the committee members, on the DLA staff and on the agencies themselves. The long hours and the packed schedule are difficult to manage and in some cases counterproductive. I note that last year the member for Araluen gave a dissenting report noting this, And I look forward, or I hope that our reflections on the process this year can help us work towards managing that better. I came to estimates this year with questions about every single portfolio. The member for Drysdale, who was our amazing record keeper, may have the stats of how many I actually got to ask. I've got no idea. But I can tell the chamber and all of those people in my community who had questions that they wanted answered, what I can tell them is that every single question I didn't get to ask, I've put in as written questions. And the current tally is more than 50 pages of questions, and I'm still compiling. I know that the public servants will already have the answers to these as they would have had in their preparation for estimates. We did learn a lot of things, though, as part of this process, and here's a small snapshot of some of the things that I heard for those people who didn't have the joy of listening to the whole 60 hours. The Chief Minister acknowledged that ICAC has serious concerns and that there will be a process to look at this, but could give no detail or time frame of what that might be. The Chief Minister reaffirmed the CLP's support for spithoods despite the previous Ombudsman's statement on the risks of serious harm, limited effectiveness and the benefits of alternative measures. The Ombudsman said they're expecting 600 police complaints this year and that they're anticipating their corrections complaints will be down from previous years, saying, and I quote, "We consider this decrease may be due to a number of factors, including the inability of prisoners to access our office, potentially due to lockdowns and being accommodated in watch houses." When asked, I was told there's no process in place to address challenges for prisoners to make complaints due to overcrowded prisoners. The Minister for Corrections later said perhaps, in fact, they were going down because prison conditions were improving. He also said that people could complain to the official visitor, and when asked about the official visitor, we were told that there's only been one official visitor covering all adult prisons across the entire Northern Territory who managed just 7 visits in the last year. Official visitors are vital for keeping prisons accountable and protecting prisoner wellbeing. One person simply cannot oversee a prison population in a territory with the world's second highest incarceration rate. And one official visitor, despite the fact that the law states the Minister must appoint at least 3 official visitors for each custodial correctional facility. Excuse me, to go on. We heard that the Territory Coordinator employs at least 16 staff, has a budget of $6.4 million, but is yet to fast-track any projects or create designated areas of economic significance. And we heard the Chief Minister tell us that she stands by the appointment of the Territory Coordinator and the process for that, including the removal of eligibility requirements from the Act, because she said the position is not an integrity position. We heard that the Treasury issued homeowner grants under a law that was not yet passed because they knew it would pass. Isn't there meant to be a separation of powers? And if the department can do what they want before a law is passed, it raises the question for me about what's the point of us being in this room here in Parliament. We heard that because of the high levels of disadvantage, the Northern Territory government gets 5 times more GST money per person than most other states, over $3 billion a year. But Treasury told us there's no way to track how this money is spent or if it's actually helping those in need. The Chair stopped me from asking the Minister for Multicultural Affairs how his views on Charles Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest, as he expressed in this chamber, when he said, "I will talk about something that shaped my thinking. This is from science. Charles Darwin's survival of the fittest theory is a well-known theory from long ago. It still rings true in many ways. People are born with different strengths and talents, and not all parts are equal. Not all people can do the same things." The Minister has said very clearly this informs his decision-making. This is the Minister responsible for disability, for multicultural affairs and equity. I was told this question was hypothetical, which is difficult to understand, given the Minister is in a role making significant financial and policy decisions about the delivery of services to people experiencing discrimination in our society on the basis of race, ethnicity, religion, age and disability. This is tangible, not hypothetical, and the community wants to know how the Minister's stated views affect that decision-making. I was told that this question was not part of the purpose of estimates. Estimates exist to test how money is spent, and preventing scrutiny of a minister's public views in making decisions about how that money is spent I think fundamentally undermines our purpose. We heard from Minister Maley that there's no specific climate change strategy, that it's just embedded in our thinking and that they're looking into how we can grow the cows faster to reduce emissions. We heard the Minister also confirm that total revenue from mining and petroleum royalties is just $298 million out of the Territory's $10.4 billion in total revenue, less than 3%. Despite what we heard in this chamber in March, we heard that corrections will no longer be staffing or using police watch houses. The Minister confirmed corrections prisoners are still being held in watch houses, some for as long as 11 days, subjected to 24-hour artificial light and no access to outdoor space. Noting the time, I've got many more things I could list, but I'll just go to the... Can you get an extension of time on these? No. Okay. So that's just a snapshot. There's so much more. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to end by reaffirming my strong support for the estimates process. It's one of the few formal mechanisms we have for real accountability and transparency. I welcome every opportunity we get to shine a light on how decisions are made and how public money is spent. Even within the constraints of limited time and sometimes the misuse of that time, we saw just how much can be uncovered when questions are asked with purpose. Territorians deserve nothing less than openness, honesty and access to information, because ultimately that's our job, and democracy works best when governments are ready and prepared to answer to the people they serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Johnson. Any other speakers? Deputy Chief Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I rise to make my contribution to this bill. But before I get started on what I want to have to say, I want to just myth-bust some of the things that we've just heard from those from the other side. Mr Deputy Speaker, the member for Arafura told the House that the CLP are going to slash these projects and there's no money to go around. But I just want to correct history here, Mr Deputy Speaker. Remember, the previous government in their budget had a program of about $5.2 billion. Last financial year, they spent $1.2 billion on that program, so there's a big difference there. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, this financial year, those on the other side only put $315 million towards that overall budget program. So they had a program of $5 billion and then themselves only going to spend $315 million. $315 million to their program, which they say they were going to complete in the next year or so. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm only a mere mechanic, but let me tell you, those maths just don't add up. There's no way those programs were going to be delivered, and they knew that, Mr Deputy Speaker. They knew that there was no way these programs, and he spoke about the health clinic and the lights, they knew that those programs were never going to be delivered, and yet they went out there, hand on their heart, and said, yes, they were. And their own figures,
Order. Leader of the Opposition, everyone else has been heard in silence. Let the Deputy Chief Minister be heard in silence.
Their own figures, $315 million. Mr Deputy Speaker, and let me tell you, that money is going for 3 projects already. It's already committed. So these things, these programs the other side are talking about, they knew they weren't going to be delivered. They were going to deliver the Mandora, the art gallery with no funding, which is going to another $8 million per year. That was committed to out of 315, and some money on some housing. So these programs that they are suggesting have been slashed were never, ever funded by the previous government. And yet they went out there into their communities and said, yes, we're going to deliver that. And yet the figures show themselves they never were going to deliver. So the Chief Minister rightly said, yes, there was not enough money to go around, and that's true. That's a true statement. There is not enough money to go around because the previous Labor government put us in about $11 billion worth of debt. $11 billion worth of debt. So there is not enough money to go around. And these programs that this Labor government seemed to run out on press release after press release and promise the world, and they knew their own books, their own budget book, $315 million were never going to deliver. He spoke about the range of programs. We know, Mr Deputy Speaker, that they're funded by the Commonwealth and they do a job. They are available for grants. They can go and get applications for grants like everyone else does in the community, Mr Deputy Speaker. So their funding is federal, and if they need more funding, I suggest they perhaps go and talk to their counterparts in Canberra, the Albanese government, the Labor government in Canberra, to get that more funding. So when they talk about how they're not funded correctly, well, it's the Australian Labor Party. The Australian Labor Party who control their funding, Mr Deputy Speaker, and those on the other side have got a direct link to that. So I suggest that they go and talk to Albanese about getting those ranges, because they're the ones who've got the chequebook. The Australian Labor Party have got the chequebook. So if they say that there's not enough funding, they need to go to their counterparts and they pick up the phone and say, hey, this program needs some more funding. And yet, Mr Deputy Speaker, we know for 8 years they failed to do that. For 8 years they failed to do that, Mr Deputy Speaker. So again, this is another classic example how the Labor government talk the talk, but they don't actually have anything behind it. There's no action behind it. Back to the $315 million for a $5 billion program. So again, Mr Deputy Speaker, you can go and do all this talking, but when you look at the facts, Mr Deputy Speaker, the facts speak for themselves, and clearly they were never going to deliver these programs, and these range of programs can be funded by the Australian Labor Party. Mr Deputy Speaker, the member for Johnson spoke about corrections. She failed to mention that those complaints have been going down since 2019. So they've been going on a downward trend, Mr Deputy Speaker. So you have to say that the corrections, and I want to shout out to all the corrections officers and the correction executives for doing a great job. And I know we've come into power in the last 9 months and made some major changes, but they've been operating behind the scenes for year in, year out, doing their job in a downward trend for those complaints. So again, a big shout out to the corrections executive. We know those complaints have been in a downward trend, and I congratulate them for that. Mr Deputy Speaker, another thing which we haven't heard from the other side about all the questions that weren't asked, and I think the member for Johnson did say about the questions behind the things and the questions in between and the questions that were and weren't asked. Well, there were no questions asked about Aboriginal affairs. No questions asked about Aboriginal affairs. And remember, Mr Deputy Speaker, estimates timing is run by the Labor Party and the crossbench. They get to pick and choose what questions get asked. They get to control the clock, and their own party got to ask or ran out of time to ask any questions about Aboriginal affairs, Northern Territory Fire and Emergency Services, housing construction, tourism, hospitality.
Order, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Guyuldjia.
Standing Order 1, the Deputy Chief Minister is actually misleading. That housing construction was discussed at estimates by the Treasurer and by the Housing Minister. So I'll ask him to withdraw that false statement.
Thank you, Member for Guyuldjia. Deputy Chief Minister, continue, but just check your facts.
Thank you. And Parks and Wildlife, Mr Deputy Speaker, DZ, they weren't asking any questions. So these hard-working public servants got out and did all the work, and yet the government had it all ready to go and made themselves available, and yet the Labor Party and the crossbench failed to ask questions about very important subjects. So again, there was a whole range of questions asked from the opposition. They asked them twice in 3 months, and we did some research, and that estimated to cost the government, the taxpayer, the territory taxpayer, over $417,000 to answer those questions. And they did it twice. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, it seems to be, and even opposition, Labor find ways to waste taxpayers' money. Find ways in opposition to waste taxpayers' money. Mr Deputy Speaker, this budget is a disciplined and responsible, and it puts Territorians first. I congratulate the Treasurer and his team on doing the work, delivering a balanced, transparent budget that focuses on reducing crime, rebuilding the economy and restoring our lifestyle. This is what Territorians voted for, and this is what Territorians deserve. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, this is what Territorians are going to get with the government from this side. We are focused on reducing crime, rebuilding our economy and restoring our lifestyle. Madam Speaker, Mr Deputy Speaker, this is exactly opposite what we inherited when we came in office. There was blowouts, there was Labor messes, there were governing by media. They had hand on heart saying they were going to deliver programs, and clearly the facts show they weren't. Again, I refer back to the $315 million they had programmed in their own budget, to spend on these programs. So for 8 years there was neglect and just skyrocketing debt. Remember, Mr Deputy Speaker, when they came in office about 8 years ago, the debt was about 1.8. and they ballooned it out to over $11 billion. That's almost $1 billion a year they spent they didn't have. Imagine if that was your own home budget and you were spending more than you earn $1 billion a year. Mr Deputy Speaker, we have solid plans and target growth for mining, energy, tourism, agriculture and defence. They are going to be our key pillars to rebuilding the economy. We're backing regional jobs, we're backing regional development, and we're backing the business and economic growth. Mr Deputy Speaker, the NT and under the CLP is open to do business. Let's look at last year's estimates, and they're clear examples of how Labor neglected the portfolios which I manage: agriculture, fisheries, mining, energy and corrections. Mr Deputy Speaker, there are still questions outstanding on notice from last year's estimates. So we asked a whole lot of questions in opposition last year, and those questions still haven't been answered by the previous government. That's right, they couldn't even bother answering important questions. And some of the exactly questions we asked, how many mango trees in the territory are currently affected by the twig tip dieback? How many grants and resources in the territory programs have moved from exploration to production? What's the longest delay about licence exploration? These questions are relatively straightforward, Mr Deputy Speaker, but they were either unwilling or unable to answer those questions from government, and yet what they did this year is they asked 2 rounds of questions costing taxpayer $417,000, wasting taxpayers' money from opposition. Like we recognise and appreciate sectors about agriculture and fisheries. We know that those opposite neglected agriculture and fisheries overlooked and biosecurity is under-resourced. 3 very important parts. Mr Deputy Speaker, you may recall that last year the member for Berkeley asked the Attorney General, the member for 𝙍𝙬𝙈𝙆𝙎, some critical questions about corrections. He asked what work was being done on planning and building for new female prisoner accommodation. Nearly after a decade in office, Labor failed to act on urgent need to build purpose-built women's prison. It wasn't until last year that funding was even discussed. Despite repeated warnings, no action was taken. Mr Deputy Speaker, the member for Johnson spoke about people in watch houses. Mr Deputy Speaker, remember the Labor government put those prisoners into watch houses. They didn't plan and they neglected the correction system so badly that we end up having to put prisoners and corrections officers into watch houses. Under government in the last 10 months, have taken those officers out, and we've created the Berrimah Correctional Centre, which is over 400 beds. We've put an extra 100 beds into Alice Springs. The Youth Detention Centre in Holtz is open and up and running. So these facilities are under immense strain, immense pressure, because this Labor government lost control of crime. They lost control. We're reforming the existing infrastructure. We are ensuring that female prisoners have their own facilities, which are separate to male prisoners. And I'm proud of the CLP government's ongoing commitment to deliver Territorians, and we're going to do things differently. The status quo is not an option under this government. Mr Deputy Speaker, the others asked me about the 𝙍𝙈𝙈𝙆 and how we went out there and about my travel expenses. And the member for 𝙍𝙬𝙈 said, oh, beers for the boys. Mr Deputy Speaker, that $2,000 is less than the money that the member for 𝙍𝙬𝙈 and the member for Daly spent on taxpayers' money on their interstate holidays. On the interstate holidays. So they went interstate on a personal holiday and spent more money. And Madam Speaker, just to clear it up, I can get it right now, that money was for ministerial staff and for the Assistant Minister for Mining to travel with us. For the Assistant Minister for Mining travels out there, and yet the member for 𝙍𝙬𝙈 and the member for Daly spend money on...
Leader of the Opposition, you're continually interjecting. I'm asking you not to do it again, otherwise I'll start looking at a warning. So please don't do it again. Continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So clearly, the member for 𝙍𝙬𝙈 and the member for Daly are happy to spend taxpayers' money interstate on their fuel bills, and they question when the Assistant Mining Minister travels to the 𝙍𝙈𝙆, and I support the 𝙍𝙈𝙆. We support the 𝙍𝙈𝙆 because we want to make sure that gas gets out of the ground. So that money we're speaking about is legitimate costs of the Assistant Minister and ministerial staff travelling to the 𝙍𝙆. Not beers for the boys, not free fuel for a holiday, for a personal holiday, not iced coffee and things like that from shops interstate. It's legitimate cost for the Assistant Minister who went to the 𝙍𝙆, and he's nodding because I was on the plane with him, he was there. We saw what was happening. So just to clear that up, Mr Deputy Speaker, clearly that the previous government spending money on interstate holidays is more a concern than them than progressing and promoting the gas in the Beetaloo. Shame on them. And I make no apologies for supporting investment in the Beetaloo. The gas produced from the Beetaloo will drive us moving forward. And that's why we need to recover our economy, and we need to do what we can to make sure we rebuild the economy, because again, like I said, the previous government left us in $11 billion worth of debt, up from about 1.8 in a mere 8 years. They wrecked the economy. We spoke about, the member for Johnson just spoke about the $300 million that mining and petroleum royalties deliver into the Northern Territory, and got down to, oh, this is only a small percentage of our overall income. But Mr Deputy Speaker, what they forgot to recognise is the contribution that is overlooked and much larger economic impact. Let me speak plainly. The resource sector is going to rebuild the economy. It's not just a royalty check, Mr Deputy Speaker, it's thousands of jobs, hundreds of local contracts and billions of dollars in economic activity right across the Northern Territory. Mr Deputy Speaker, had those on the other side actually bothered to ask the relevant questions, they would have discovered that the mining and petroleum sector spent $500 million in exploration in the Northern Territory in 24 alone. So half of that's $500 million in exploration. Mr Deputy Speaker, and that money goes to the Territory, it goes to the roadhouses, it goes to the local contractors. It benefits the suppliers, the drilling, the hire, the fuel, the consumables, the regional accommodation. So we're talking about royalties of $300 million, which in itself is a large amount, but on top of that, these are the relevant questions that the crossbench failed to ask because it didn't suit their narrative. It didn't suit their narrative because they don't want to rebuild the economy. They want us to go away, spend more money, end up with a massive debt, which is going to affect Territorians as we move forward. The mining and petroleum sector directly supports Territory businesses. The mining sector alone, over 4,000 people have got jobs directly in the mining. It accounts for 25% of the NT's gross state product. That's double the national average. Mr Deputy Speaker, the planned impacts maintenance shutdown in August this year is estimated to inject $200 million into the local economy and offer dozens of local contracts. So again, when you just focus on royalty, which is $300 million, but what about the exploration, $500 million? What about the 4,000 jobs? What about the $200 million investment that's going to happen this year? Newmont, Mr Deputy Speaker, have just spent $1.8 billion on a new mine shaft that will extend the mine well beyond 24 and flowing through to local suppliers and contractors. I've been out that mine myself, Mr Deputy Speaker. I've seen it. I've seen the local contractors out there. I've seen the people flying in from Darwin, flying in from right across Australia, but the people delivering fuel, delivering toilet paper, delivering soap. They're the local jobs that this $1.8 billion, I'll let that sink in, $1.8 billion investment in the Northern Territory to extend their mine life. They're the relevant questions. They're the important questions that the crossbench should have been asking, but it doesn't suit their narrative. It doesn't suit the narrative because they think that the mining and the royalties is a demon. It's not a demon, it's a saviour. It's going to save our economy, and I make no apologies for supporting it wholeheartedly. And Mr Deputy Speaker, whilst I'm here in this role, I'll do whatever I can to support those industries because that is going to rebuild our economy. It's going to get us back where we can go and build lights in Manuel, where we can go and build health clinics, where we can go and support ranger groups, unlike the previous government who actually destroyed the economy. And I hope, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the other sides are taking notes because they need a lesson, because our economy is where we are because of them. There are well-documented shortfalls in the East Coast gas, and again, the Beetaloo has enough gas in it to fuel our economy for 200 years. The member for Marie-Clare speaking about Germany's got 80% renewables. What she forgot to tell the estimate is that when they run out of power, they just connect across the border to get power from a nuclear reactor. So when they do run out of solar, they just flick a switch and the power comes from somewhere else. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, unfortunately in the Territory, we can't flick a switch. We can't just have power from somewhere else. We've got to have that spinning reserve here ready to go because we can't rely upon anyone else because we are Australia. We're an island state. We don't have a power line from a neighbouring country where we can just get power. We saw the exact sample in South Australia. They've got a renewable target and they're borrowing power and taking power from Victoria, which is coal. So if you want to have a narrative of how good renewables are, well, you've got to look at the big picture. And we don't have a Norway or another country right next door where we can flick a switch and get extra power from nuclear reactors and coal power and gas. We've got the territory, and this is where we are. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, we need to really look at stuff in the territory is irrelevant, and I know the member for Lakeland maybe get her information from the Australia Institute, which is based in Canberra. Really, that says it all. Getting information from somewhere based in Canberra and not being here in the Northern Territory day in, day out. Like I've been here a long time, and lots of people here have been a long time, because we think the Northern Territory is a place worth fighting for. We're going to cut red tape. We're going to show the world the territory is open for business. And it's already worked, Mr Deputy Speaker. We know that the 𝙍𝙈𝙆𝙍 just got about $120 million injected into it. And just recently, in the last week or so, there's been some really promising results from gas flows, 7 TJ or 7.2 TJ a day. That is going to be great. We need to get that gas into a pipeline, into our coal power, into our generators, so we can have power. We can turn the lights on, because unfortunately renewables need that spinning reserve, and that gas is going to firm up our system. Look, we delivered the mining and energy and operating budget of $40 million. We're key to support the 𝙍𝙆𝙆 through the 𝙍𝙆 Project Management Office. We're going to make sure that we deal with the fishing, because fishing is dear to me. We're going to look at reef fish. We're going to deal with biosecurity. We're going to deal with browsing ants. We need to make sure that these things aren't neglected like the previous Labor government, and they didn't care, and they still don't care. Meanwhile, our government is investing in biosecurity, agriculture, mining and the petroleum industry, because we know what's best for the territory, and we want to fight for it, because the territory is worth fighting for. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Minister. Are there any other further speakers? Member for 𝙍𝙬𝙎𝙏.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and certainly take the opportunity to rise today to speak on the Estimates Committee, the process, and certainly want to begin, Mr Speaker, by just acknowledging and thanking all of the the Assembly staff for their tireless efforts in supporting the Estimates Committee. A big shout out in particular to all of the amazing Hansard staff who stayed on every day late into the evening and night preparing the Hansard to be made available for Territorians, Mr Speaker. I want to also acknowledge the Secretariat staff of the Estimates Committee, again, who have been working tirelessly, not just for the 2 weeks that the committee has met, but for the weeks leading into the committee, Mr Speaker. I want to also acknowledge the committee members. I know that there were a number of members of this Assembly who participated as committee members, and I want to certainly acknowledge and thank them. In particular, I do want to acknowledge and thank and recognise the hard work of the committee chair, the member for Drysdale, for his work. I want to also acknowledge the deputy chairs. I know that there were a few that jumped in to certainly help that process along. And I want to also acknowledge the member for Johnston, who has basically been at nearly, I think, every session of the Estimates Committee, working hard for the people of the Northern Territory. Look, estimates is a very important process. It enables us as members of the Legislative Assembly to bring forward and ask questions of the government to determine what expenditure is planned, what has been spent, what policy settings, what strategies are being used or going to be introduced over the reporting period. But in particular, Mr Speaker, I want to absolutely acknowledge and say a huge thank you to all of the Territorians who provided their valuable input and insights into providing areas where they thought was important for government to be questioned, whether that was around expenditure, whether that was around policy, or whether that was around finding out operational decisions and who had made those and where they'd been made. So I want to just say thank you to every Territorian who reached out to their local Member of Parliament with an idea, with a suggestion. I want to thank the organisations, the stakeholder groups, the industry groups as well, who we have met with over months talking and who've raised concerns about things. And I just want to say thank you for all the work that you've done, and thank you for being your strong advocates in your relevant area. Certainly we did hear a lot during estimates, and those 60 hours absolutely were used in their entirety. I do want to acknowledge that for most of the time the committee was very respectful of one another. Sure, there were a few little jabs coming here and there from members of this assembly. I'm not sure who they are. But I just, I think certainly a bit of work. But I just want to, stress the importance that the Estimates Committee was a very productive committee, very positive, working together and moving forward that. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. Working through that, there were a number of questions that were asked, and certainly there are a number of answers that we got back. Some of those provided a lot of clarity. Some of those, unfortunately, did not give us or the organisations or the individuals... Oh, look at that. I think that's a fire alarm.
I might take the advice of the clerk.
I had nothing to do with it.
I've asked the clerk to check out.
Mr. Clark?
Yeah, stop the clock. Can we stop the clock, please? Yep, oh, good.
All right. Okay, let's evacuate.
Time left in your speech.
Okay. Yeah. We good?
Please continue.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I've certainly delivered some fiery speeches in here before, but never one this hot. So, Madam Speaker, let's just get through it because the territory is burning, Madam Speaker. The territory is burning, and we've just had 2 weeks of estimates where we have heard just how hot it is, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, as I was saying previously before the alarm went off, Madam Speaker, this estimates process enabled us the opportunity to come together, to ask the questions to the ministers, to actually acknowledge all of the amazing work of the Northern Territory's public servants. Again, I want to acknowledge how hard it is for a number of our public servants who have to come and front estimates and sometimes might be uncomfortable, might be their first time doing it. So I just want to give them a big shout out and say thank you and remind people that public servants are not political. They absolutely are there to carry forward and implement the legislation of the government of the day. And I just want to say to all those hard-working public servants, we see you, we hear you, and we absolutely thank you. Madam Speaker, what we did hear in estimates, though, was a number of really alarming things. And I want to talk about commitments because it's something that the CLP are allergic to. We heard that they're not going to be committed to introducing a stand-alone DV peak body. They are not committed to introducing a stand-alone children and families peak body. They're not committed to implementing a Safe Drinking Water Act in the Northern Territory despite the Department of Health already doing the work to implement a Safe Drinking Water Act, Madam Speaker. We heard Dawn House and the Catherine Women's Crisis Service find out through estimates that the infrastructure funding and plans for their services was being cut, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we heard the Minister for the Environment talk about how this CLP government was walking away from their commitments when it comes to reducing carbon emissions, Madam Speaker, by 2030. That target, gone. The Minister, big smile on his face as he's talking about it. We heard, Madam Speaker, the work that that agency, the Department of the Environment, had been doing, all going away, Madam Speaker, gone. The Deputy Chief Minister spoke about today and has continued to talk about rangers. Aboriginal rangers matter. They matter to the Northern Territory. The CLP government come in here and they talk about Commonwealth funding. The Commonwealth Labor government continue to fund ranger groups. The Commonwealth Labor government will continue to invest in Aboriginal ranger groups across the Northern Territory. The CLP government broke their election commitment around a $12 million fund over 4 years from 2024 for Aboriginal ranger group grants in the Northern Territory. Another broken commitment, Madam Speaker. They'll get up and they'll talk about time-limited funding. That's fine. They can do that, Madam Speaker, but let's absolutely be clear. They made the commitment to fund Aboriginal ranger groups in the Northern Territory, to invest $12 million after they were elected, Madam Speaker. That's what an election commitment is. And they ripped it out of the hands of Aboriginal Territorians, Madam Speaker. That is the type of stuff we heard this week during the parliamentary estimates process. We heard a number of ministers unable to answer basic questions, Madam Speaker. Very, very basic questions. We did, however, see a number of ministers who did answer questions. I want to actually give two of them an acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge the Northern Territory's Education Minister, who was very calm, big smiles over there to her, and we worked through hearing about the wonderful investment in education that Territory Labor left before we left office, Madam Speaker. That's what we heard. Again, I want to acknowledge the ministers who did respond. I want to acknowledge Minister Kale, who has a very difficult portfolio in child protection, but we were able to work through and ask some really important questions, and I do want to acknowledge that. We also heard, Madam Speaker, that the Northern Territory CLP government has not met with one single law and justice group across the Northern Territory. They have not met with one law and justice group across the Territory. This is a government who talks big about addressing crime and antisocial behaviour, that wants to work to change the way things are done in the Territory, who claims that we need to do things differently, but yet won't get out and talk to people in the communities on the ground with the lived experience and who have the solutions, have been ignored, not even had the opportunity to meet with the government. The Attorney-General spoke about how the Northern Territory government had removed $300,000 for a systemic racism review into the Northern Territory Police. An important investment that was absolutely needed, Madam Speaker, done by the Northern Territory's Anti-Discrimination Commission. We heard again that this government could not answer simple questions on how many people had been released on bail under their time in office, Madam Speaker. The Deputy Chief Minister could not answer a single question about $6,000 or thereabouts of expenditure on ministerial travel listed than other, but comes in today and says, oh, hang on, I remember I took the Assistant Minister. Pretty sad that you can't even remember your own colleague when you're sitting before the Estimates Committee that they travelled out with you. We had a number of members of the Estimates Committee, shout out to all of them, did a great job, but it's really alarming when you are having to ask questions in estimates of your own government around issues in your own electorate, Madam Speaker. That is the type of questions that should be asked by your colleagues any time, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, I do want to also acknowledge that there is significant work happening across the Territory, not because of the Territory government, but because of the federal government. We heard through estimates that the Amampa Road is still going to go ahead because of the federal Labor investment. We did hear, though, Madam Speaker, again, that Yingiya School Stage 1 investments would proceed, but unfortunately Stage 2 investments were not going to happen under the CLP government. We heard in 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙑𝘼𝙉 in the beautiful Berkeley that $8.7 million investment for 𝙍𝙀𝙀𝙑𝙼𝙀 School is not going to happen anymore under the CLP government. Now, I'm going to say this, Madam Speaker, and you all guess who I am. What about the Berkeley? Well, it appears that he forgot about the Berkeley because they're not getting this investment into the Berkeley anymore. This investment has been pulled out of the Berkeley, the minister's electorate. Now, we spoke about homelands, we spoke about housing, we spoke about subdivisions, all important work that needs to continue to be done, Madam Speaker. And we heard firsthand how the agencies and how the departments are going to continue to do significant investment right across the Territory, Madam Speaker. But what we heard is that the Northern Territory government is unclear if they will reach their own target of 270 houses built in the reporting period, Madam Speaker. We heard as well that the Northern Territory government was unable to confirm whether public servants or executive contracted CEOs were still employed or not, if they had resigned or not, or if they had their contracts renewed or not. Basic questions that we could not get straight answers from, Madam Speaker. This is not good. Territorians absolutely deserve to know who's being paid and who's not, who's employed and who's not, Madam Speaker. Now, we continue to do the work as opposition and the independents and the crossbench to ask these important questions, Madam Speaker, because it is important to understand where the investment is going. We've heard about what's happening in the domestic and family violence space. The Minister spoke about a number of initiatives. We made it very clear that we absolutely are not discounting the need to look at doing things differently. We just want to understand where and how the money's going. I want to acknowledge and I want to thank the Minister for the Prevention of Domestic and Family Violence, who was able to confirm to us simple questions that the Corrections Minister couldn't, and that is that the domestic and family violence in the prisons will be evaluated in line with the evaluation frameworks. And I want to thank the Hansard for accurately capturing that, because that's simple things that the Corrections Minister failed to answer. It was quite an abysmal appearance by the Corrections Minister, could not answer simple questions. Lucky he has a very competent Corrections Commissioner, because we're able to get those questions out. This is, Madam Speaker, incredibly important in the Northern Territory. Now, I want to also, Madam Speaker, just put some attention, of course, over to education and health, and we did hear around significant investments that are being made in those particular areas. And I wanted to, of course, acknowledge all of the hard-working teachers. We were able to ask questions around what investment is going in there and what's being done. But, Madam Speaker, what is very clear is that this government, 10 months in, is fumbling. Now, they might not have had the big gotcha moments in this estimates, but this is the first estimates. The corruption, the no leadership, the lack of leadership, the lack of vision, it's all starting to grow, and that'll be exposed in the future estimates processes, Madam Speaker, because what we are seeing very early on is the lack of willingness to answer simple questions. The deferrals to other ministers to ask those questions, kicking the can down the road because they don't feel comfortable in answering those questions, Madam Speaker. We had the Attorney-General who couldn't answer a simple question about law reform she had single-handedly played an important role in bringing to the Parliament and passing. We heard the Territory Coordinator, huge expenditure, but unable to tell us in any meaningful way what projects had been streamlined or fast-tracked, what was in the pipeline to be streamlined and fast-checked, Madam Speaker. We heard that agencies and statutory bodies had had reductions in their budgets that deliver critical services here in the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, this is alarming, and I know that there have been many Territorians who have been watching the estimates process over the last 2 weeks. Madam Speaker, when I reflect on estimates and I reflect on the questions that we asked, I am absolutely astonished at the incompetence, the absolute incompetence of the Territory's Minister for the Arts. His session was an absolute disgrace, and he totally disrespected the absolute integrity and credibility and creativity of our Northern Territory artists and creatives. The fact that he has not even been to a remote Aboriginal community off the bitumen is alarming. We produce this nation's greatest remote Aboriginal artists, and to have someone who has not even been bothered to go to a remote community off the bitumen, been to one remote Aboriginal community of Hermannsburg, 130 k's out of Alice Springs. You have the Attorney-General for the Northern Territory, having not been to one Aboriginal remote community in 10 months. Absolutely disgraceful. Aboriginal people matter as well. This should be a budget for all Territorians, and this is a budget for a select few. There are very few ministers on that side of this chamber who have gotten off the beaten track and gotten out into remote communities, who have heard from remote Territorians, who have listened to remote Territorians. And you should absolutely be disgusted and ashamed of yourself. Because if your budget was a budget for every Territorian, you would be out in the bush talking about your budget. You would be out in the bush telling everyone how this budget is for them. But it is not. This budget is for a select few. This budget is not for remote Territorians. This budget is not for pastoralists, not for remote Aboriginal Territorians, not for businesses outside of Darwin. No new money to tackle antisocial behaviour in Alice Springs. And you all say that you're serious about addressing crime in Alice Springs. Where's the new money? Where's the investment? Zero. Nothing. You have no credibility in Alice Springs anymore because there is nothing new in this budget for the good people of Alice Springs, and you should be ashamed of yourselves.
Next speaker, Member for Mulga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak on estimates and budget. I'd like to thank the member for Johnston for asking many of my questions in the first week while I was unwell. I'd like to thank the committee staff who have worked hard to support estimates, and all those who took part in the estimates across the process. There were some serious issues raised during the estimates, and I have already raised many of the big concerns about lack of funding for rangers homelands, and remote communities in my budget speech in May. I would like to talk about an issue that happened last week when the member for Johnston was asked a question on my behalf. The deputy chair stated that it was not okay to ask a question about systemic racism in a government sham. The member for Johnston was asked to rephrase the question so it did not contain the words systemic racism. Madam Speaker, the phrase systemic racism is not a rude or an offence. They are not disorderly words. What the member for Penny Bay, who was the deputy chair, needs to understand is that those of us who are Aboriginal, systemic racism is something that we face, and I know that. I know, I felt it, and I see it. We know it exists because it is part of our daily experience, and it needs to be talked about. If we are going to fix the problems, every person in the estimate room, who allowed the chair to make a ruling that she would not allow the question to go to the words of the systemic racism in it. Helping to embed systemic racism in our systems. This have been challenged by everyone. We are not targeting anyone with the words, but we can feel there is systemic racism. And if we can't take it, we can't address the problems that it creates. The question that the member for Johnston asked for on my behalf was about a clear case of systemic racism. The concession scheme is designed to help people who have very little money. The information that I have from the government outlines 95 people in my electorate are on the concession schemes, with approximately 5,500 adults in my electorate for many of whom live in poor conditions and are on Centrelink. I think if the scheme was helping everyone equally, that the number of the people on the scheme should be a lot more. But there are barriers for remote Aboriginal communities to access the anti-concession scheme. Those barriers are access to services that promote the scheme, access to services that sign people up to the scheme, language barriers, literacy barriers, access to internet barriers. These are all the barriers that impact many Aboriginal remote communities. And these barriers create systemic racism where Aboriginal people have less access to pathways to support these barriers, systemic racism. This is the very definition of the racism, systemic racism. Systemic racism is when laws, policies, or practices within an area and across agencies produce a discriminatory outcome on and racist cultural groups. While the laws apply and practice may appear in the neutral, they result in uneven or unfair outcomes. These words are not rude words that cannot be said, because these are real issues that affect many people and need to be addressed. To have a Parliament committee that is on most of the important matters and committees, not allow questions that discuss racist and systemic racism in proper and dangerous. Need to be, rather, they are silencing the problems and experience of many people in the NT. The question was not about individual racism, which is a problem that we should be discussing as well. But it was a question about systemic racism and the estimates hearings, the time when the systems of government are scrutinized, so that we can identify problems to exist, or that exist rather, Madam Speaker. I think there needs to be some training for the members of Parliament and the members of the committees, so they can understand and identify issues of systemic racism without fear and concern. So I think I'm running out of time now, almost. I'll leave it here.
Okay,
Madam
thank
Speaker.
you, Member for Mulga. Are there other speakers? Member for 𝙍𝙗𝙗.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I just want to start by just responding to some of the things that we've heard today in the chamber about agencies that didn't get questioned. I do think it was completely misleading for the Deputy Chief Minister to say that the opposition crossbench had no questions for Aboriginal Affairs or emergency response. Those agencies were at the end of each section and the estimate sessions run at a time. I do think there's simply not enough time allocated for these crucial estimates for the whole process. Personally, I had many questions for our emergency services, bushfires NT, parks and wildlife, areas that I'm very passionate about and my constituents care about that I missed out on asking, but I will be sending through written questions. And thank you once again, as other people have said, to all of the people who worked so hard to prepare for that who didn't get a chance. During the estimates hearing, it became abundantly clear that the Territory is being governed not by evidence or public interest, but by an aggressive pursuit of deregulation and limited transparency, all for the sake of short-term profit. The CLP government continues to insist that they are making risky environmental decisions for the sake of the economy, but when pressed, could not provide clear evidence that these investments were going to provide return for Territorians. We heard ministers continue to spout propaganda from the gas industry and ignore facts and science. Around the processes for estimates, I am very grateful for the member for Drysdale's genuine efforts as chair. It's an incredibly difficult role, as it became clear to me during it, and he did it fairly. However, we still saw many ministers attempting to shut down questions that were in fact related to their portfolios and in the public's interest. And I also must note, as has been brought up here, that there were many times when acting chairs shut down different lines of legitimate questioning in what appeared to be attempts to protect their colleagues in the hot seat and were completely inappropriate uses of the chair's powers. And I hope that doesn't continue with next committee, any other committee hearings. In particular, the question around systemic racism that the member for Fanny Bay shut down was wholly inappropriate use of the chair's power for that. I do have to start now with probably one of the more upsetting things we heard in estimates, is that Dawn House and Katherine Women's Crisis Centre found out through estimates that their funding had been slashed. This government, in a crisis of men's violence against women, when women are being killed every month, if not every week, not only slashed their funding, but didn't bother to tell them before estimates. It's disgraceful. In the case of Dawn House, we heard that $6.5 million that they'd been promised for critical infrastructure was being rescinded. They have spent years working on the plans for this. The buildings are falling down. They have hundreds of women and children they are turned away every single month, and the funding, like that, just gone. Now, the CLP tried to blame Labor, but let me be clear. This government managed to find millions of dollars for the gas industry. They managed to find $6 million for the Territory Coordinator. It's a disgrace. I hope the fate of every woman and child turned away from Dawn House as a result of this cut will weigh heavily on their consciences. What emerged across multiple hearings is a pattern. The government is systematically removing public oversight of environmental decisions, accelerating approvals for extractive industries and blocking Territorians from accessing any information on these decisions, with the Territory Coordinator being a clear example of this. We heard last Monday from the Chief Minister that there was Tuesday, there was no formal hiring process for the role of the Territory Coordinator, and that he was simply handpicked as he was, quote, the best person for the job, which is something that is hard to be sure if you don't advertise the role and take applications. There was no assurance that the Territory Coordinator wouldn't be unduly influenced by his buddies in the gas industry, with no mechanism for public oversight of lobbyist meetings with the Territory Coordinator in place. I continued this line of questioning, and when asked why the government had chosen to implement a weak lobbyist register which does not publish who the lobbyists are meeting with, once again an integral part of a lobbyist register, or how frequently, all the Chief Minister could say was that it was a policy decision. This truly begs the question of what are they trying to hide, and in whose best interest are the CLP government operating? It certainly isn't for everyday Territorians. Now, let me be clear, these are not isolated policy choices. This is a coordinated effort to strip back regulation, weaken independent oversight, and hand more power to developers, mining corporations and gas companies, all at the expense of Territorians, especially traditional custodians on whose lands these contracts apply to. Throughout the 2 weeks, ministers continued to proudly show off the ways in which they had reduced mechanisms for public scrutiny upon development, with the removal of third-party merits reviews being a core aspect of this. When asked to explain the reasoning, the government claimed this was to reduce delays and uncertainty. But let's be honest, they simply want fewer challenges and less accountability. If they truly wanted improved outcomes for the Territory, we would be seeing an investment in climate mitigation and adaptation throughout our planning, environmental investments and protections, disaster preparedness and more. And I know I spoke a lot about climate change during these estimates, particularly adaptation and mitigation. And you know what? I hope everyone in this chamber, I hope I repeat it so often that they get sick of hearing it, because I cannot stand here and let the Territory that I know and love be left to fall apart under the climate risks that are coming. We have had government after government completely fail to prepare us for what climate change is going to do to the Territory. Don't forget, Northern Australia, we're at the front lines. We experience the most extreme of all the changes that are coming, and we have a government who is doing nothing to prepare people for this. When I asked the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries if he had a climate change strategy, the Minister said it was simply embedded in their thinking with nothing actually in writing. He insisted they're thinking about the environment by seeing how we can, quote, grow the cows quicker and grow the grass more efficient, end quote. What a disaster for these sectors. I want our agriculture and fisheries to thrive and to be able to respond and adapt to the changing climate that they rely on, that we rely on. And we have a minister for these industries who abdicates all responsibility for this. I am deeply concerned for the future of the industries if that is who is leading the charge. I was at least encouraged to hear there is an Office of Climate Change within the Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment, but they only have a funding of $2.6 million, which is pennies. I was disappointed that the Minister who oversees this department could not give me a definition of climate change, could not tell me what causes climate change, and refused to explain what the department's definition of climate change mitigation and adaptation is. Let me be clear, this is indicative of a government who have their heads in the sand about climate risk. This is indicative of a government who is so driven ideologically to oppose international scientific consensus on climate change that they would rather let the territory be destroyed by climate change than actually do anything about it. On top of that, in December last year, the government quietly removed the requirement for the NTEPA to provide independent advice on every onshore gas environment management plan. That's right, independent environmental advice is no longer a mandatory part of this process. This sends a message that the regulator's job is not to protect the environment, but to clear the path for industry. The government keeps saying we have a robust regulatory framework, when really all this government is doing is facilitating the destruction of the environment. This government continues to boast about their plans to frack the Beetaloo Basin, while this remains one of the most high-risk developments in the territory's history, with very little economic return. The gas industry's water use, emissions and waste pose unacceptable threats to our groundwater and climate. And yet this government claims it can now selectively implement the PEPRA inquiry recommendations. Let me remind everyone, those 135 recommendations were the bare minimum conditions for fracking to go ahead, not a menu to choose from, but the baseline for safety, trust and social licence. What we're seeing now is a dismantling of those safeguards, with the Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment yesterday acknowledging this willingness to ignore vital restrictions, stating, quote, "That does not mean that we will adhere to the letter of every single inquiry recommendation, some of which were overly prescriptive and are now outdated, especially where those pose impediments to the industry." So this is a minister and a department that is putting the needs of the industry above the environment. That does not sound like an environment minister to me. Despite this fast tracking and red tape, we have not seen any new resourcing for compliance. This is dangerous. Earlier this year, the Minister for Renewables scrapped the 2030 target for 50% renewable energy, justifying this due to the supposed excessive cost to taxpayers, giving it a figure of $5 billion. When I asked the Minister for Renewables how he came up with this figure, despite government estimates of $280 million, he was unable to provide any metric for these calculations. He simply said, "We talked to the industry and that was an estimate." Again, showing the willingness to blatantly lie to the public and blindly trust the mining and gas sector to make decisions for the territories. In the interest of 30 seconds, look, we also had a Deputy Treasurer admit that the department began the operation of the first home owner grant before the legislation had passed through Parliament. This seems to me an incredibly serious legal issue and clear violation of proper democratic process. I'm incredibly concerned about the ramifications of this. We also had the Treasurer admit that they do not consider the cost of social harms to the community from the predatory gambling industry. These harms cost our economy millions more than what we get in taxes, but this is not even taken into consideration. In my final moments, I do want to thank all the public servants who are working hard, and I'm incredibly thankful for them who run these departments and ensure that this place still runs despite the government's attempt to turn this place into a train wreck.
Member for Brennan, Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise tonight to talk to the estimates process that we have just undertaken for the last 2 weeks, but also going back to the original budget that the Treasurer handed down early May. And I want to just remind Territorians and those here in the chamber that this budget, which he delivered, was responsible, it was transparent, it was realistic, and it was for Territorians. And we all have heard time and time again that we inherited a debt of $11 billion. So in coming into government, we had to make some really tough decisions because Madam Speaker, that's what a government does. It makes tough decisions so that it can govern for the whole of the Northern Territory. And so listening here today with some of the commentary from various members across the chamber, I absolutely need to put on record that some of the things that are being said are absolutely outrageous. We had the member for 𝙍𝙬𝙈𝙆𝙍 basically accusing the government of being anything but transparent, talking about like gotcha moments that we were trying to get, basically saying that we were lacking in answers of all the questions, which I find astounding because he's actually talking about the government that he was part of when he was the Attorney General. That is what we experienced in opposition for 4 long years. Listening to their non-ministers, their government members, filibust for hours and hours on end, not to mention the actual ministers who at one stage, one of them brought a football in and was throwing that around the room, which was absolutely disgraceful. And that was the kind of ministers and government we had under Labor for that last 4 years when we were in opposition. So, member for 𝙍𝙬𝙆𝙍, I just do not agree with the fact that you thought we were getting gotcha moments. And actually a couple of the members on the other side talked about the fact that the backbenchers of the government were time wasting. That's not true at all. And I think I remember the chair quoting some numbers about how out of the whole entire day, which was 12 hours worth, I think the government members asked 20 minutes worth of questions. And Madam Speaker, MLAs in the government also have their democratic right to represent Territorians and ask those questions. So I think that 20 minutes out of 12 hours a day is not a great deal of time. So I don't think we were filibustering in the way that certainly the member for 𝙍𝙬𝙆𝙍 and the member for Johnston talked about how we did that. The other part of it I heard was that they thought that ministers were also time wasting with answering those questions. I mean, estimates is a time when the opposition asks questions and the minister goes through those answers, and then of course we have our officials with us from the departments who add to the contribution, and that's how it works, and it always has worked. And I don't think any of the ministers were overly explaining their answers. I mean, we were trying to get to the bottom. At one stage, I feel like I was asked the same question 3 or 4 times because they didn't like the answer that I gave. And I heard that time and time again throughout the estimates process. And the thing is, just because you don't like the answer, it doesn't mean that it's not the answer. So I think the fact that that's a bit misleading in terms of how that's been represented about the government. A few other parts about the budget and about the estimates was this whole accusation of all these cuts and, not delivering on all these promises. I mean, we have been in government for 10 months. So saying we're not delivering on promises, they obviously haven't been listening, and I will go through shortly all of the things we have delivered. But when it comes to having to reprioritise a huge budget deficit, we saw a program when we came to government, an infrastructure program, which had $5 billion worth of projects on it, which were just wish list projects. Every time Labor made an announcement in a particular part of the Northern Territory, they just threw it in the program, said we'll worry about that later. There was never any money allocated to those projects. In fact, I heard the Deputy Chief Minister say there was $319 million of the $5 billion that had been allocated, which is 3 projects across the Northern Territory in the next 12 months. So of course we have to make tough decisions. Of course every dollar we have has to count, and we make no apologies for that. Madam Speaker, the accusations about Dawn House, I mean, none of us want to see women rocking up to shelters and being turned away. That is horrific. But this is not a new problem. We have been experiencing this, and it has been escalating for years and years and years. The previous government did very little to address this. They actually watered down the laws when it comes to domestic violence perpetrators. And then we have members of the opposition accusing us of not supporting the shelters. The minister was very clear in her answers about Dawn House, that she had met with Dawn House. She met with them straight after the budget. She notified them of the changes on the 13th of June, so setting the record straight there. and that she said really clearly during estimates, and I was listening in as well, that she was working with them to ensure that they could actually provide the services they need to, and they can expand because it is needed. And let's not forget, not only were they watering down domestic violence laws, this particular Dawn House funding sat on the reverted works on this infrastructure program for years and years and years and years.
Order,
so do not come in here and tell us that we don't care about domestic violence. It's absolutely shameful. We're the ones that brought in domestic violence changes so that there was mandatory sentencing, that we expanded the victims register, we increased the victims levy by 40%. That's our government that's done that. We care more about domestic violence than any other government has so far.
Order. Can
now,
we stop the interjections on both sides?
When it comes to answering of the questions, and I just want to pick up on some of the things the member for Nightcliff was saying about gas and the territory coordinator, because I don't think she realises that we need to rebuild the economy because we've had 8 years of Labor trashing it and it going backwards year after year after year. The way we rebuild our economy is through things like gas, through things like development, which the territory coordinator needs to do. How are we going to fund police, health, housing, education, domestic violence, which we just spoke about, if we don't have a strong economy? The way we do that is through gas, mining, agriculture, tourism, and of course we need the territory coordinator. And I'm telling you right now, Member for Nightcliff, you can ask in this House until you're blue in the face about why we're spending this much on this and this much on that. We will not make no apologies for spending money and making the decisions on the territory coordinator, on gas, because we need to rebuild the economy.
Order.
We are not going to accept the status quo. We came into government elected overwhelmingly with a huge majority to make changes, because we're not going to accept the status quo. We're here to change the territory for the better, rebuild the economy, restore our lifestyle, which had been devastated by crime, so we have to reduce crime too. And that's exactly what we've done in the last 10 months. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the fact that we heard the opposition a few times today say that they didn't get time to ask questions. I mean, the outputs are all there. It's all there so they can manage their time, they can manage their questions. Like I said before, one of those days, only 20 minutes out of 12 hours was taken up by government MLAs, which are very important questions that they wanted to ask. So it really is about the opposition that was squandering the time and wasting the time and disrespecting the public servants who worked so very hard to put all of that work together so that they were ready for their ministers to answer all those questions. In fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in my portfolios, we didn't even get to half of the independent commissioners. We didn't get to tourism, hospitality, major events, parks and wildlife and racing, which includes, of course, hospitality, liquor, gaming, all of those things. Like, we didn't get to have one question asked of us.
Order. Member for Blaine.
All of that work. So the other part I want to point out, Mr. Speaker, which is absolutely unbelievable. Labor still can work out from opposition a way to waste Territorians' money. They came to the ministers in written questions in March, asking like pages and pages and pages of questions about whole-of-government agency-related questions. The department spent all the time going through and getting all those answered. They went back to the opposition. And then 3 months later, I don't know how much changes in 3 months. These guys had 8 years and didn't change very much. In fact, they made it worse. They asked the same lot of questions to every agency. Actually, no, Mr. Deputy Speaker, every single agency except education. Go figure. Maybe they don't care as much about education as they say. So,
Order.
Mr. Deputy Speaker,
thank you.
The asking of those questions twice actually cost Territorians $417,000 each time. So that times 2. Still wasting Territory taxpayers' money. That is something we won't do, and we won't do
Order.
a
Member for
review.
Wadja, you were heard in silence. Let the minister be heard in silence too, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They don't like to hear the truth, because this is also a previous government under Labor who loved a review for the sake of a review. They used to review reviews. It was constant. Nothing ever got done. All they did was talk about it. So when it comes to the racism review, which everybody seems to be so up in arms about over there on that side, we have this racism review which was promised by the previous Chief Minister for the Anti-Discrimination Commission to do. It's $300,000. This is after police have already employed someone to deal with racism within the police. She's already started all that work. Basically, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're just getting on with the job. We want to make sure that we don't have racism in our police and other areas right across the territory, and there's some work to be done there. We all acknowledge that. We all sat here about a month ago and explained that that's what we saw and we needed to work on. But it doesn't mean we need to do 1 million reviews on it. And we had to use that $300,000, talked about having to come to government, making tough decisions. That's exactly what we did. We had legal aid facing an absolute crisis because of NAJA's legal crisis. And so NAJA, legal aid, all having crises, victims taking even longer to have justice, defendants not being able to be represented in courts. Guess what? We had to use that $300,000 to fund legal aid. And we did that. We made that decision. And I make no apologies for that whatsoever. We have to get on with the job. We have to keep going. And if that means that we change things, that's exactly what we're here to do. We were elected to change things, and we make no apologies for that. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the other part I wanted to talk about was the fact that we've had, in my Attorney General's portfolio specifically, we had the years and years of Labor watering down laws. I talked about domestic violence before. And we've had years and years of neglecting our courts. And we have come into government and we've started strengthening all the laws. We've had Declan's Law, we've had the bail laws, the strongest in the nation now. We've had more powers for police, for public drinking. We've had post and boast laws. We've had mandatory assaults against workers, ram raids. The list goes on. And there are numbers there that support the fact that what we're doing is starting to work. Post and boast, for example, there's been 7 people charged. Guess what? That's 7 people that would not have been charged under Labor. They now have consequences for their actions because we do not want people going around committing crimes and then posting about it on social media. That is absolutely disgusting. The victims in those cases just go through more and more and more trauma, and that is not okay under our watch. Goodness. I mean, what about the no money in the budget for Alice Springs that we were accused of just a few moments ago by the member for 𝙍𝙬𝙈𝙀𝙎? I mean, honestly, we have done more for Alice Springs in the last 10 months than Labor did in the last 8 years. They had extra police go down, they had South Australian police go down. All the laws that we're changing that I've already spoken about, guess who that helps? Alice Springs. That's what we needed. They absolutely need it. They've got a lot of There's a lot of work to be done right across the territory, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You cannot change 8 years of no consequences, no accountability and criminals walking around the streets because Labor didn't care about that. And remember, they thought that jailing was failing. Well, guess what? Bailing's failing as well. So we fixed that. Unlike you, who did not fix it. You let it go out of control. You let the crime crisis...
Point of order. Sorry, member for 𝙍𝙬𝙈.
The point of order, Mr. Speaker, the Attorney General is misleading. Standing Order 110 relevant. She's misleading Parliament. It's the Deputy Chief Minister who said jailing is failing. And what, are you going to be offended by another glass of water?
Take your seat. Take your seat. Continue, Minister.
I thought that the member for 𝙍𝙬𝙈 had a shirt that was jailing is failing. Pretty sure. I've seen it. I think I've seen him out the front of this house. Jailing is failing. Well, we are strengthening the laws, we're investing in our courts, which are so neglected, we're looking at reducing those remand days because victims need justice earlier. We don't want it to be in the hundreds and hundreds, which it has been under Labor for a very long time. And we will keep doing that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And we will keep answering the questions. We will keep making the changes to be a transparent government, to be able to answer those questions. We were the government that brought back scrutiny committees. We were the government that extended the debate time for petitions so that Territorians could be heard in the Parliament. We were the ones that brought in the lobbyist register. I don't know how much more transparent we need to be, but we will continue that because we make no apologies for the changes that we're making right across the territory. We were elected to reduce crime, to rebuild the economy and to restore our lifestyle. And we will continue to do that work, and we do not apologise for the changes we are making. We will keep delivering that. We've already delivered so much in that time, and we're not stopping. This is not a set and forget. We've got another 3.5 years to go through to actually start to see some real results for Territorians. All they wanted for so long was for a government that listened and that could deliver on their promises. And we're doing that. We are absolutely doing that. And we're happy to be questioned about it, and we were questioned about it for 60 whole hours, and we answered all those questions. I'm pretty sure there weren't that many questions taken on notice either, which was a pretty good result considering there's a lot of information that is available to be asked, and it's up to the opposition to manage their time to be able to ask those questions. So I think we have been able to deliver a responsible, transparent, realistic budget for Territorians. We will continue to answer the questions, and we'll continue to make the changes, and we'll continue to not apologise for those changes, because Territorians deserve a government which they can listen and that will act, and that will just keep on delivering for a better and safer territory for all Territorians. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Any further speaking? Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I rise to start with a positive contribution to the Estimates Committee, and I start by thanking all of the Estimates Committee members. A big thank you to the Chair, the member for Drysdale, and I agree with all the comments in the House that have, I would like to echo how professional he was in his first estimates and how fair, particularly to the opposition and the crossbench. I think he ultimately handled the position in the way that the estimate spirit should be. So thank you to the member for Drysdale for his great work in the chair role. Couple of good, zinger stayings as well, which I'm sure will take through, and hopefully he gets a chance to chair next year's estimates. Thank you also to the Deputy Chair, the member for Fanny Bay, for your work. I know you're unwell during some of the time, but still struggled through, particularly for today. So thank you, member for Fanny Bay. Member for Karama, Mr Deputy Speaker, yourself in your role. The member for Johnston, who, as we've heard, did not miss a single minute of the 60 hours of estimates. So thank you for your dedication. And of course, to my very own teammate, the member for Arafura, for his contribution on the Estimates Committee. And I did say this to Madam Speaker, the member for Araluen. I never thought I would say it, but today I said it to her. I actually really missed her in estimates this process, Mr Deputy Speaker. The voice of not just Araluen, but Central Australia is very fierce with the member for Araluen, and it was a very big change not to have her come in and do some of the regular questions and the important questions for her constituents in Central Australia. But I really hope the Madam Speaker, the member for Arafura, and member for Araluen still puts in her many very important written questions that I'm sure she will on behalf of her constituents. Mr Deputy Speaker, I think that's probably most of the positive things that I can say about the estimates process for this year. When I think about the first budget that the CLP government has delivered, my first questions are these. What kind of territory will this budget help shape? What legacy does it do to build for Territorians? And Mr Deputy Speaker, unfortunately, the answer is bleak. The Territory needed a budget that would invest in people, deliver jobs and make our communities safer. What we got from the CLP government is a plan for deeper debt, less opportunity and broken election commitments. Mr Deputy Speaker, the last 2 weeks of estimates really exposed the lack of fiscal strategy by the government, their lack of economic vision from their government, and Mr Deputy Speaker, it can only be described as economic vandals. The CLP are economic vandals, Mr Deputy Speaker, who have started robbing the future of the very Territorians we are supposed to represent in this place. They are supposed to build a Territory's future, Mr Deputy Speaker, for all, not just some. And unfortunately, under the leadership of Leah Finocchiaro, the Chief Minister, the member for Spillett, and the Treasurer, Bill Yan, the member for Namatjira, they are robbing the Territory's future. Somehow, Mr Deputy Speaker, the CLP have managed to deliver a budget that burdens Territorians with an additional $1.5 billion of debt, despite cutting $1 billion out of the infrastructure budget, raking in an extra $1 billion in Commonwealth funding and other revenue, Mr Deputy Speaker. And when you think about those three key facts when it comes to dollars, Mr Deputy Speaker, more money in the coffers, less investment in communities, yet more debt, it absolutely beggars belief. It demonstrates a key lack of economic vision for the support of growing the Territory's economy, for providing real and lasting opportunities to ensure all Territorians thrive no matter where they live. And Mr Deputy Speaker, as I said earlier, this is a budget that saddles Territorians with an additional $1.5 billion in debt over the forward estimates. $1.5 billion in just a matter of a few years. And reading the CLP government's papers, Mr Deputy Speaker, it becomes very clear very quickly that whilst they talk a big talk and talk a big game, they deliver very, very little, if anything. And why the CLP has made such a show of removing the debt ceiling, which was an accountability measure, Mr Deputy Speaker, effectively dismantling a key measure of accountability when it comes to government funding. Government spending and funding. Mr Deputy Speaker, it becomes clear as soon as you look at page 6 of the budget paper 2 to see that they have absolutely no plan for reducing debt. They haven't even made an attempt to reduce the Territory's debt, Mr Deputy Speaker. Just an ever-growing $1.8 million every day in interest payments for Territorians to pay. And Mr Deputy Speaker, when the CLP government is asked what's their answer and what's their economic vision for the future, they always say the Territory Coordinator. Well, in estimates, we found out $21 million to set up the Territory Coordinator office. Not one single project, not one single report, and not one single area of significance declared by the Territory Coordinator. $21 million. Where has it gone, Mr Deputy Speaker? And they cannot answer that, Mr Deputy Speaker. Moody's reviewed the Territory's credit rating in March 2025, and at that time it remained unchanged from the 2024-25 mid-year report. However, Mr Deputy Speaker, the government's own budget papers acknowledge that they do not know how their unchecked debt might impact the Territory's credit rating into the future. In fact, the budget papers foreshadow a potential rating downgrade as a result of their incredibly poor budget effort, and I quote, "Since this assessment, the government has repealed the legislated debt ceiling and has approved significant new operating and capital commitments, increasing fiscal balance, deficits and debt levels in the 2025-26 budget." That's the end of the budget paper quote, Mr Deputy Speaker. And as I said, a clear lack of responsibility when it comes to the debt and deficit bill of Territory taxpayers. What is less clear, though, Mr Deputy Speaker, is what the government has to show for this reckless accumulation of debt, or what Territorians will even get out of it. And I will get to some of that a little bit later. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Treasurer has made some motherhood statements about reducing debt, but there is very little substance to his plan. For example, he says he's going to grow own source revenue by growing the population, yet his own budget papers in black and white, Mr Deputy Speaker, predict population growth, which includes births, to remain steady, growing at 1.2% by 28-29. This is hypocritical of the CLP, who use the slogans such as "we will not accept the status quo," which we've heard in this place time and time again. This is accepting the status quo, Mr Deputy Speaker, and this flies in the face of public comments of the Treasurer, which he made in April this year about growing the population by 4,000 people per year. And we sought answers from both the Treasurer and the Minister for Trade, Business and Nation Relations about how they intend to meet this stretch and this target. And we did not get real answers beyond the new designated area migration agreement, which I might say, 𝙍𝙀𝙈𝙋𝙎 Mark III is an exciting piece of work, and we were proud in the former Labor government to have 𝙍𝙀𝙈 I and 𝙍𝙀𝙈 Mark II. For the work that is being done with 𝙍𝙀𝙈, it is fantastic. It will allow for 1,500 skilled migrants each year to the Territory, and the third iteration will win, which is a win largely by the federal Albanese Labor government and our very own member for Solomon, Luke Gosling, rather than the CLP government, who've swung in at the last minute to claim victory for something that was done over many years by the former Labor government. Minister Kale, who also the Workforce and Population Minister, said in her department estimates that it wasn't really her responsibility to grow the population, but it was everybody else's job. Everyone but her, Mr Deputy Speaker. And meanwhile, Territorians remain none the wiser about how the government will deliver on this aspect of their supposed debt reduction strategy. As I said, the rest of the proposed plans are just motherhood statements lacking any clear action or key performance indicators. No accountability, which they said, the CLP government said and claimed that they would be accountable. The only other tangible plan that is provided for the budget papers is a cut of $20 million from each government agency, and that's only if their budget is above $20 million. And it is still unclear, Mr Deputy Speaker, how they will achieve these cuts, whether through sacking staff, cutting programs, because each minister couldn't answer to the specific question that we asked to every single agency that was before the Estimates Committee. It was something that we will be monitoring very closely, Mr Deputy Speaker. What we do know is that the CLP government is trying to cover up something when it comes to protecting public sector jobs. We know this because they've spent the last 2 weeks contradicting each other and themselves about whether there are caps on public sector jobs or not. Earlier this year, the Chief Minister, the Memphis Spillett, said that there was a cap on non-frontline public sector jobs. And when we asked about it on the second Monday this week to the Minister for Public Employment, she answered no, there was not. In the very same estimate session, at one point the Minister said the government was keeping redundancy protections. Then at another point she said that they weren't. So which was it, Mr Deputy Speaker? We still don't know. This is a minister who is not across a brief when it comes to the internalised bargaining agreements, and it is completely ridiculous considering there are more EBAs that are on the table that need to be completed over the next couple of years. This is either incompetence, Mr Deputy Speaker, or a deliberate lack of transparency and accountability when it comes to answering questions about the Territory's future and our jobs in the public service. The CLP government must come clean about public servants and whether they are taking away entitlements and using the EBA negotiations to sack by stealth. Our public servants certainly deserve much better than what they're getting from the current CLP, who claim to value them. We found out just yesterday, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the CLP government has cut $635,000 out of Environmental Assessment Unit, including cutting staff. So that's a fair indication of how they'll be expecting departments to meet their $20 million austerity measures, Mr Deputy Speaker. And speaking of EBAs, while we know there is more funding going into police services, that is well and truly offset by an inefficient and insulting pay offer to our hard-working police officers. The police that were promised to be backed no matter what by the now Chief Minister Leah Finocchiaro. Again, more of that talk and none of that action that people expected, those who went to the polls and supported the CLP in their vote. Mr Deputy Speaker, we strongly urge the Member for Cassara and the Minister for Public Employment to get back to the table and start negotiating in good faith in relation to the important police EBA negotiations. And unfortunately, like a scrapping of portable long service leave for 10,000 community service workers, Mr Deputy Speaker, we can only hope that there is some type of win for those who are working day in and day out to support Territorians in each of their sectors, and that perhaps there will be a population strategy at hand. In fact, we are in danger of seeing more of our police officers make the decision to move into state where they will receive better pay and conditions and perhaps actually feel supported by their government and make sure they are getting action and not just talk. Mr Deputy Speaker, during estimates we heard the Chief Minister brush off questions about rising crime statistics under her watch. She made a number of very misleading comments, questioning the credibility of statistics published on the NT Police website, the government website. These are the very same crime statistics, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the Chief Minister, the member for Spillett, quoted often while she was the opposition leader. It's a very different story now, Mr Deputy Speaker, now that Leah Finocchiaro, the Chief Minister, the member for Spillett, is in government. And apparently the crime statistics are just fake news or just used to cherry-pick her own statistics. According to the Chief Minister, the member for Spillett, it's not true that violent offences, sexual offences, domestic violence, property offences are more or either worse or no better under the CLP government. And the data speaks for itself. Mr Deputy Speaker, let's not forget, the Chief Minister came to power on the promise, on the mandate that she had a law and order agenda. She came to power saying she would fix crime and stop crime. She told Territorians she would make our communities safer. And now all she can offer is that the crime stats are wrong and we should celebrate the small wins, which I agree we should, but that the ignorance of ignoring all of the rest of the statistics by her own very department shouldn't be taken to account because it doesn't suit the Chief Minister's narrative. And that, Mr Deputy Speaker, is a genuine reflection of the lack of leadership by the Chief Minister, making gimmick announcements and arming the public with OC spray, with no details, making important decisions around announcements for the Northern Territory, yet no detail behind it. The irony is, Mr Deputy Speaker, that this is effectively an admission of failure by the Chief Minister, Leah Finocchiaro, that she has not done anything meaningful to prevent or reduce crime or to keep our communities safe. She has simply passed on the responsibility to the everyday Territorian to defend themselves in an event of crime, and every Territorian for themselves on their own. Mr Deputy Speaker, every Territorian has the right to defend themselves and their families, but OC spray is not the long-term answer for Territory safety. And it is beyond disappointing, Mr Deputy Speaker, that this government has completely and utterly failed to invest in any measure that will stop crime from actually occurring. A promise they made Territorians in the Territory election. And if you're looking for answers in the budget around the government's plan in this space, save yourself the read, Mr Deputy Speaker, because we've done the reading for everybody. It is simply not a priority in the CLP budget. It is bitterly disappointing to receive confirmation that those opposite have slashed more than $3 million to law and justice groups, which we heard the Attorney-General has not even bothered to visit any of them herself in the 10 months she's been the Attorney-General, putting the future of those law and justice groups at risk. And I know, Mr Deputy Speaker, because I was contacted by a law and justice group in my electorate of Arnhem who knows that the CLP government is trying to backtrack out of a very important agreement that supports community safety and that is led from the grassroots to prevent crime and family and domestic violence in their region. Mr Deputy Speaker, we know that cultural and community leadership is an integrated part of everyday life, particularly for our remote Territorians. And when it comes to the justice processes, this is not a short-term fix. This is not an easy journey, but it is one that was already embarked on and demands the respect to be continued to be supported financially and morally, Mr Deputy Speaker. They work with victims and families at the community level and are supported by government and non-government services in their region. And it is beyond belief, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the Attorney-General has effectively thrown her hands up and put her hands up in defeat in the 𝙍𝙀𝙑𝘼𝙉 basket and say, let's slash the $3 million from those important groups. No clear answer and no clear respect or care for that amazing work, that very important work and that extremely hard work that our law and justice groups are putting in the effort day in and day out in their own communities to make a difference for the better. I know that one of my law and justice groups in my electorate, the Barunga Wugala Law and Justice Committee, Mr Deputy Speaker, is in serious danger of not being able to operate. And I want to quote from the committee's action plan. Quote, the Barunga Wugala Law and Culture Justice Committee project stands as a powerful expression of community determination to deliver safer, more culturally grounded features for young people, the future of the Territory. Mr Deputy Speaker, we've seen also the failures of the Corrections Minister, and I know the member for 𝙍𝙀𝙈𝙀 has spoken in length about that. Many discrepancies, and I'll just give you one in the essence of time. The member for Nelson, the Deputy Chief Minister, claimed in his evidence to the Estimates Committee when asked that 1,100 of the Territory's 2,400 prisoners were engaged in some form of employment. Then he changed his answer, Mr Deputy Speaker, and said, oh, actually, no, 1,100 prisoners were engaged in behaviour change programs. Well, both are great if they're true, Mr Deputy Speaker, but which is it? He couldn't answer, he couldn't provide that detail. And this is just simply begs belief, Mr Deputy Speaker. And meanwhile, we've seen the sledgehammer to the infrastructure budget, a whopping $1 billion out of the infrastructure program for upgrades, new builds, and things that Territorians, not just in our town centres, not just in our regional centres, but in our remote and very remote parts of the Territory, all appreciate when there are infrastructure investments in their street, in their community, in their town, in their region. and the funding of roads and bridges, barge landings, hospitals, health clinics, schools, homeland centres, community development projects and more have been cut by the CLP government, who are too cowardice to go out and to talk to the very people that these decisions they have made in their very first budget affect, Mr Deputy Speaker. I even asked the Treasurer, as the Infrastructure Minister, to come out and speak to people in my electorate for a very important project that has been cut from the budget. Just a swipe of a pen and off we go, $20 million down the drain. That has been years and years and years in the making to get the Phelps River crossing done on the 𝙍𝙈𝙈𝙋𝙎 road. Years and years and years, Mr Deputy Speaker. And the Treasurer could not even say that he will commit to a visit to 𝙍𝙈𝙈, to Nooka, places that I know he's been or been close to that has never gone back to. And those people of the Northern Territory who are out of sight, out of mind, because they do not fit with the government's so-called agenda, are the ones who are going to miss out, Mr Deputy Speaker. But I will be here, not just as the member for Arnhem, but as the opposition leader, to make sure that those Territorians are not forgotten by the CLP government, because they would like to reinvent history of the decisions that they've made in this budget. But we know, Mr Deputy Speaker, that they will be telling, because the CLP government are economic vandals, not just for one, but for all.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. Are there any further speakers? Member for Katherine.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Rise to speak on the Appropriation Bill and Revenue Amendment Bill 2025, part of the first budget delivered by the Finocchiaro CLP government. And as it was my first estimates process, for all of us on this side being now in government, it was a different process being on the other side, Mr Deputy Speaker. So I'd like to start by thanking our hard-working public servants, Legislative Assembly staff for your contributions to the budget and estimates process, and also to the Estimates Committee, who did a stellar job. The Chair, the Deputy Chair, for your contributions to what is part of an important parliamentary process. Mr Deputy Speaker, what the estimates process showed us is that the Labor opposition still hasn't learned, and I think we've just heard the opposition leader go off on a bit of a rant then, have not learned a thing about their election drubbing they had in August last year. I pick up on some of the comments the Leader of the Opposition had, economic vandals. Like, really, Mr Deputy Speaker? That is extremely rich, coming from a now opposition that have been there for 19 of the last 23 years, and over the last 8 years left us with an $11 billion almost debt. Absolutely shocking. This budget was not a flashy budget, Mr Deputy Speaker. It was a responsible budget after we inherited, as I said, from 8 years of Labor, almost $11 billion of debt. And with that in mind, we continue to hear the current opposition leader, with a diminished team, no doubt, Mr Deputy Speaker, screaming uncontrollably about all of our cuts. So I'll remind the opposition leader, who was one of the 4 former education ministers of the last government, of what she has left us to clean up. And we have had to reprioritise many projects. We haven't cut them, Mr Deputy Speaker. We have reprioritised to other times because there is just not the money to put to those projects. There were some projects that absolutely have to be finished because they're already started, but there are many that we've had to reprioritise because the lack of fiscal management over the last 8 years of the previous Labor government. So the Education Minister, as the Education Minister, I'm the Education Minister for all students right across the Territory, not just whether they're remote or regional or here in Darwin. It doesn't matter where they go to school. I represent them right across the Territory. So yes, we've had to reprioritise budgets. School attendance rates, we know, were at record lows. We discovered the secret list of students, and I've spoken about this many times, the intensive support role. These are kids who hadn't attended school for 20 days or more, Mr Deputy Speaker, that the former government used to mask their poor attendance rates. During the estimates process, we saw the opposition claim our government is cutting school infrastructure, and the member for 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝘀𝙑𝘼𝙉 did give a bit of a backhanded compliment before, but I'll take a compliment nonetheless. that they signed up under the Better Fairer Schools Agreement, but I'd also remind them that what they didn't take into consideration as a team is there was no consultation there with the non-government sector in the education. And again, as I say, the Minister for Education sits as the Minister for all students in the Territory, government, non-government, no matter what they are. And we heard a lot about 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙑𝘼𝙉, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I can just hope that whilst the member for Berkeley is probably watching from his bed, because I know that he wouldn't like to miss out on this process, and I can just see him yelling at his screen, rolling his eyes at the absolute rubbish that came out from the opposition, because again, Mr Deputy Speaker, this is a furphy. 8 years of Labor, or 19 of the last 23 years, they have been in government and they had every opportunity in the world to make sure that the 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙼 school making sure that the infrastructure there actually went ahead. And so the money that we've had to reprioritise from that project, we spent days agonising over what would be reprioritised and not. And I can tell you that it was not a nice conversation that I had to go and have with the member for Berkeley that we weren't doing that project, because he knows more than any of us of how important it is at 𝙍𝙀𝙀𝙀𝙀. I've had conversations with Chris, the principal there at that school. There's kids there that I've spoken to when I was down at the NT Border Studies in February this year. And all these children deserve to have infrastructure that is fitting for their school and for the teachers to work at in those schools. So it's not that we, say we don't care about the bush. We have members from Darwin right through to Alice Springs representing the bush in many, many areas. So we absolutely care about all of those people out there right across the Territory. Announcing projects without budgets was a hallmark of the former Labor government, and for the projects that went ahead, they went over budget again, wasting Territorians' money. And I'll remind the opposition of why we had to agonise over reprioritising of funds, that we couldn't deliver on, because we have the Tiger Brennan overpass, went from 61.5 million to 160.9 million. The State Square Gallery, 47 million to 143 million. The Royal Darwin Hospital mental health expansion, 38 million to 86.3 million. The $12 million Nightcliff Police Station, which is not fit for purpose. The Shiplift, 100 million to 515 million. The Darwin Youth Justice Centre, 50 million to 135 million. And let's not forget the opposition leader's legacy, the 61 million 𝙍𝙀𝙈𝙀𝙀𝙀 blowout. And she was the health minister whilst that project absolutely blew out. The 2025-26 budget delivers a record $1.6 billion spend in education and training, including $120 million for vocational and higher education. Mr Deputy Speaker, we are committed to investing in the future of our children, and the CLP government is driving reforms to improve school attendance and hold parents accountable for ensuring their children go to school. And we will not shy away from that. In our year of action, certainty and security, we've allocated $12.9 million to boost school attendance through the School Attendance Officer program, an increase of more than $4 million from last year. Since the introduction of school attendance officers and making the statistics about Labor's intensive support role, there's been a reduction in almost 500 students on the intensive support role. We're delivering on our literacy and numeracy plan with a $14.2 million boost to roll out explicit teaching across the Territory, which will ensure that schools are getting back to basics, supporting students to build these fundamental skills. And we want every child to have the strongest start in life, and that starts with a solid foundation in literacy and numeracy. We're delivering on our election commitment to keep and attract teachers in the Territory. This budget invests $13.8 million to keep and attract teachers in government schools by giving them financial certainty and moving them off short-term contracts and into permanent positions, so they have confidence to put down roots and stay in the Territory. We've increased permanent classroom teacher workforce to 75% by 2027, and we are well on our way to achieving this. As of now, 69% of classroom teachers are permanent employees, which is an increase of 6.7% compared to the same time last year. We're committed to ensuring qualified school counsellors are based in schools, not offices, unlike the previous government, and properly resourcing them by committing $1.9 million to expand the qualified school counsellors in schools. To improve the candidate eligibility and interest, the school counsellor role will have broader essential qualifications like counselling, social work or psychology, and a more focused scope of practice. We've also had the Swimming in Schools announcement that was a $3 million election commitment to make sure we know that that's crucial for our territory lifestyle, Mr Deputy Speaker, and it's great to speak to parents and schools that have previously not done lessons before and hear their positive feedback. Children, in the Swimming in Schools program, we will ensure that all children learn essential swimming and water safety skills as part of their education and as part of the broader initiative to provide cost of living relief to territory families. And 127 schools have committed to the Swim and Survive program so far by working with the NT School of Sport. On top of those initiatives for education, we've had back-to-school vouchers, delivering cost of living relief for families, sporting vouchers as well to support families, and also expanding on our school-based policing program. So, unlike the former Labor government, we are focused on delivering funding certainty for Territorians. So, to the opposition, you know, what I would say, Mr Deputy Speaker, is they can make as much noise as they like, but we won't distract Territorians from your disastrous 8 years that they were all a part of, that we continue, Mr Deputy Speaker, of cleaning up the mess. And just getting back to 𝙍𝙈𝙆𝙈𝙃 there, I just want to correct, because, you know, we haven't even been there. We're not representing or going out to remote communities. We actually had a great trip booked for going to 𝙍𝙈𝙆𝙃, and we had that fantastic late rain, Mr Deputy Speaker, at the end of May, which we've had to cancel, and I was heading out there with the member for Berkeley, so I look forward to rescheduling that soon. But what I will say is that the estimates process overall I found, you know, quite okay. There was a lot of we heard the member for Nightcliff earlier on saying about she didn't get time to ask questions. Well, as opposition and crossbench members, that's up to them to make sure that they allocate their time accordingly. And I'd say if they choose to not allocate their time accordingly, then that's on them. That's not on us. So we'll continue to clean up the Labor mess that they've left behind for us, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I commend the Appropriation Bill and Revenue Amendment Bill 2025 to the House. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Katherine. Are there any other speakers? Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I rise to provide my input into this debate on the Appropriations Bill.
Sorry.
Standing order one, are you closing the debate?
No, there is no closing the debate.
There is no closing the debate.
There's no wrap-up in this session.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Wrap it up there, Bill.
Righto. And of course, this is part of the first budget delivered by the Whanokē-Aro CLP government. And before I speak the significance of these bills and the work that they enable, I want to place on the record my appreciation for the hard work and dedication shown over the past fortnight. To the Chair, Deputy Chair and members of the Estimates Committee, I thank you very, very much. Your scrutiny and questions are a vital part of our parliamentary process. And I also extend my thanks to the staff of the Legislative Assembly and to all the public servants and departmental officers who work tirelessly to prepare and participate in the hearings. And it's through this robust process, Mr Deputy Speaker, that Territorians can see not only how their money is spent, but also who is focused on fighting for them and who is distracted on fighting for themselves. Mr Deputy Speaker, this is not just a budget, it is a reset. It provides a strong financial foundation for the CLP's responsible, focused and ambitious plan to rebuild the Territory. The Appropriations Bill 2025-26 authorises $9.18 billion in spending, including $2.2 billion in new policy commitments, sweeping tax reforms and long overdue infrastructure repair. It's a budget built on reducing crime, rebuilding our economy and restoring the Territory lifestyle we all love so much.
And it stands in sharp contrast to the chaos and recklessness we inherited from those opposite. Let me remind this chamber of the position the former government left us in when we took office. We found record debt, $10.55 billion and rising. We found frontline services held together with sticky tape and time-limited funding cliffs worth over $350 million a year. We found press releases with no delivery plans, promises without budgets, and projects that existed only on paper. And let's look at some of those projects. The Mandorah Marine Facility has gone up from $50 million to $84.3 million. The Royal Darwin Hospital Mental Health changes there from $38 million up to $86.3 million. And that's really just scratching the surface, Mr Deputy Speaker. If it wasn't clear enough during estimates as to why some projects have been delayed or rescheduled, the answer is simple. Because Labor misled Territorians about what could be delivered, and this government is now having to clean up the projects that they couldn't. We will not follow Labor's example. We will not announce projects that we can't pay for. We will not pretend something is shovel-ready when it hasn't even been costed. We're delivering infrastructure on time and on budget and with integrity. And that's why we referred the Darwin Shiplift to the Public Accounts Committee, because Territorians deserve to know the truth and what the cost of that project is going to be. For over a month to go through page by page with your red pens and highlighters, well, I remember the Leader of the Opposition saying that, and I'm not exactly sure if she's managed to do that during this estimates process. Because, Mr Deputy Speaker, if after 2 weeks of estimates the opposition still can't find the money, maybe it's not the budget that's the problem, maybe it's them. When we came to office, the so-called record infrastructure program we inherited was an absolute circus. Projects overpromised, costs hidden, communities misled, and projects were lucky to make it off the shelf, and if they did, they were way over budget because they sat on that program for so long with old costings. And of course, we've heard of some of those examples. Tiger Brennan, that's a $99 million blowout. The State Square Art Gallery, that monument to political vanity, $47 to $143 million. And the Youth Justice Centre from $50 million to $135 million, Mr Deputy Speaker. And the former government's approach to budgeting was like a pyromaniac managing the fire brigade, setting fires and blaming others for the smoke. And it's very, very pertinent today. And yet again, this is what we've heard from the Leader of the Opposition: refusal to take any responsibility for the position the Territory finds itself in due to the budget that we inherited. And the Leader of the Opposition called us economic vandals. I tell you what, Mr Deputy Speaker, I think the Leader of the Opposition might want to go and have a look in the mirror. Because during estimates we heard constant complaints from the opposition that $1 billion worth of projects were scrapped. Madam Speaker, their claims in the last 2 weeks have defied belief. Even in opposition, they've continued to mislead Territorians. The projects they refer to were never properly funded to begin with. And it's not that we scrapped them, it's just that they were never actually real. They were just press releases. And let's be clear, announcing a project without a budget is not governance, it's fantasy. And unfortunately for the Territory, the former government spent 8 years of governing in their own make-believe world where projects didn't need to be cashed and debt didn't exist. And if you want to know where the money went, well, it's all in the budget books. You know, the ones you received on this floor, the ones you've now had for over a month to go through, as I said, page by page with your red pens and highlighters. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Territory's biggest ever investment into public safety has occurred in this budget. And the CLP makes no apologies for prioritising law and order. In this budget, we've committed $1.5 billion to public safety, the largest investment in Territory history. And this includes $608 million for police, $495 million for corrections, who the previous government seems to have forgotten about, $78 million for court system resourcing, and $180 million for domestic, family and sexual violence initiatives over 5 years. And Mr Deputy Speaker, we are backing our police, we're backing our courts, and we are backing corrections, and of course we are backing in our victims, because community safety is not optional for us. And what did the previous government do? They put offender welfare ahead of victim safety. They put criminals ahead of the community, letting violent offenders walk, re-offend, and then walk again. And the member for 𝙍𝙈𝙈𝙍𝙬 in his contribution today said that we haven't provided anything for Alice Springs. There's no new money. Well, I can tell you, Mr Deputy Speaker, there are 1.5 billion reasons that we're actually investing into Alice Springs. And we all remember what the member for 𝙍𝙬 did to Alice Springs when he repealed the liquor laws back a few years ago. We all know what actually happened in Alice Springs, and I'll tell you now, Mr Deputy Speaker, the people of Alice Springs have not forgotten, and they have not forgiven.
Point of order.
Point of order, member 𝙍𝙬.
Standing Order 1, Mr Speaker, the member for Namatjira needs to correct the record. Legislation wasn't repealed. That's Commonwealth legislation. This parliament didn't repeal any law. Well, I just asked that you correct the record because you're factually incorrect.
Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'll happily correct the record. Yes, it was federal legislation that was falling away, and the previous Labor government had the opportunity to bring in legislation to provide that safety net for the people of Central Australia, and they did not do it, Mr Deputy Speaker. They let that legislation lapse, didn't bother to put anything in its place, and let Alice Springs burn. And to stand here and be lectured by the member for 𝙍𝙬 that we're not investing into law and order and social order in Alice Springs is an absolute joke and is an absolute insult. So, under Labor, Mr Deputy Speaker, you could break into someone's home and get a warning. Under the CLP, well, you're going to face some consequences. Under Labor, victims were told to be patient. Under the CLP, we've introduced Australia's toughest bail laws and new offences for ram raids, knife crimes and glorifying violence online. With this budget, we are delivering not just words, but laws and consequences. But, Madam Speaker, this is also a roadmap for economic renewal. We inherited an economy that was stagnant, just 1% growth on average for 8 years, 4 years of actual decline, families leaving and businesses closing. And, Madam Speaker, we're starting to turn that ship around. Forecasts now show 7.8% growth in 25-26 and 5.9% growth in 26-27, the fastest in the country, and that is no accident. We're making the Territory the best place to do business by creating the conditions for private investment. $2 million into workforce attraction and skilled migration. $6.4 million for the Office of the Territory Coordinator, $88.4 million into tourism and streamlined approvals to cut red tape and get projects moving. We're also backing gas, agriculture, mining, defence and tourism, sectors where the Territory holds a natural competitive advantage over the rest of the country. We've passed tax reforms to stimulate the economy and reward Territorians and helping it rebuild with the highest payroll tax-free threshold in the country, now at $2.5 million. Abolished payroll tax on over 3,700 apprentices and trainees. Simplified exemptions for charities and not-for-profits, and introducing a fair 50-cent floor for online lottery and gaming taxation. These are pro-growth, pro-jobs policies. And that's what you'll get from a CLP government, Madam Speaker, an economy that people want to invest in, work and operate in. And Madam Speaker, I want to take a moment to reflect on the opposition's conduct during estimates. Madam Speaker, what we're seeing from the opposition is a party completely unwilling to reflect on their own record in government. They refuse to reckon with the debt they racked up, the services they hollowed out and the communities they left behind. It's like they live like the past is a foreign country to Labor. Instead, all they offer now are personal attacks, cheap, lazy and hollow. No vision, no policy, just noise. And Madam Speaker, that's not scrutiny, it's deflection, and Territorians see right through it. And when it comes down to it, the opposition has not taken this process seriously because, Madam Speaker, I'm not exactly sure whether they were very serious about the entire budget process, and you can see that in the previous budgets that they delivered and the fiscal path that they placed the Territory on. They fixated on infrastructure projects that were already broken, budgets that were already spent, and press releases they apparently never read. They're not here for Territorians, Madam Speaker. They're here for themselves, fighting over political legacy projects while the CLP gets on with the job of delivering a budget that repairs the legacy of their mess. And one such project they just can't let go of, even posting about on social media after I gave them a clear answer about its status during estimates, is the removal of the Pepperminardi Police Station from the infrastructure program. And Madam Speaker, the clear answer that I gave was that the community and the police expressed to the government that they did not want it. So why would we progress with it when you have a community and a police force that say that they don't want it? The opposition always carry on to say that we're not out talking to the community or listening to the community. Well, this is a very, very clear piece where we've listened to the community and we've listened to the organisation and we're not progressing with it. Madam Speaker, as the CLP delivers a budget that puts the Territory on a path to recovery after Labor's 8 long years of a fiscal fiasco, the last thing we need to do is a repeat of the Nightcliff Police Station, wasting money on building useless infrastructure that is of no use to the community. After 2 weeks of estimates, it's clearer than ever that the opposition have the wrong priorities. They used estimates to advocate for projects they couldn't deliver on and that Territorians don't want their advocacy on. Madam Speaker, the opposition's inability to focus on what matters makes it even clearer that with the CLP's first budget, this government is putting money where it's needed and where it's wanted. We're showing Territorians that we believe every community matters. This budget shows Territorians that the CLP is serious about making every Territorian family feel safe and that every child has the future that they deserve. The CLP, Madam Speaker, have the priorities right. And unlike Labor, we're not going to fund status symbols in Darwin at the cost of Territorians' future while Alice Springs is in crisis. And this budget invests in what makes the Territory feel like home. We've committed $615 million for remote housing, $4.34 billion in total capital works, $290 million in household relief and subsidies, $2.5 billion for health and $1.6 billion for education. And I picked up on the comments from the member for Arafura, where again he's trying to gaslight and mislead Territorians. He spoke about the cyclone shelter in Manuel. Well, we can't build all these cyclone shelters in one go, and the priority cyclone shelter happens to be in Nhulunbuy. So the one in Nhulunbuy will get built first, and then the program for the one in Manuel will come second, because that was the second priority. The Carlin compound, he said, we've stopped the money for the Carlin compound. Well, I actually met with the members from the Carlin compound and I spoke about this in estimates. And yes, I can't deliver it in this financial year, but I gave the commitment to the people from the Carlin compound that I'll deliver it in the outer years, because we just don't have the money to deliver it, everything in the one budget. And of course, he also spoke about housing targets and how we were reducing delivering houses over the next 12 months. And again, I explained that in estimates, and I'll explain it here in the chamber again today, Madam Speaker. And this is where Labor have made a mess of this. They didn't deliver enough lots to put the houses on. So we can build the houses, the transportable houses, but if you don't have anywhere to put them, Madam Speaker, what is the point? So the focus in the next 12 months is delivering the all-important lots out in communities so that we can then start delivering housing to them. So, and just, I'll go back to home in Alice Springs, and just for Alice Springs alone, and again, the member for 𝙍𝙀𝙑𝙀 said that we're not investing, there was no new money for Alice Springs. Well, there's $168.7 million to restore safety and livability.
Silence, please.
A new library, a skate and play precinct, a multicultural centre and a visitor centre. We've saved Anzac Oval and restored it. Land is being released for new housing at Kilgariff and free pool access in summer to beat the heat. We're also investing in Alice Springs in events and culture, $36.5 million for major events, fireworks protected on Territory Day, new walking trails, new sports facilities to support Aboriginal supports. Because the Territory isn't just a place to live, it's a place to belong, a place worth putting down roots, and a place worth staying here for good. And we want people to come and call the Territory home. And let me address this head on again. We are not cutting services. We are doing the opposite and funding them properly. We're delivering $1.5 billion for hospitals, $313 million for primary care, $135 million for mental health, and $100 million in new annual funding for health operations. In education, free TAFE, bonuses for apprentices and trainees, $120 million for vocational and higher education, remote Aboriginal investment funding of $842 million, Madam Speaker. Labor made big promises with short-term funding, but we are delivering funding certainty and continuity, something that those opposite couldn't do. Madam Speaker, Territorians didn't elect us to sit on our hands and watch our crime and our economy further descend into crisis. They elected us to act, and in our year of action, we are putting victims before offenders. We're cutting taxes, not services. We are fixing infrastructure and delivering infrastructure, not just headlines. We are funding the front line, not just this budget, but into the future. And we are backing in every Territorian, not just the politically connected. This is what real leadership looks like, Madam Speaker. So to those opposite still clutching onto their cut and paste press releases, still confused about where all the money went, still asking why we didn't fund their pet projects, I say this. If you had have done your job, you would have your pet projects and we wouldn't have to clean up your mess. But we are cleaning it up line by line, project by project, community by community, because that's what Territorians have asked us to do. And we will not let them down, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I commend the Appropriation Bill and Revenue Amendment Bill 2025 to the House. And Madam Speaker, I move that the bill be read a third time.
The question is that the expenditure proposed in the Appropriation 2025... No? That the expenditure proposed in the appropriation.
No, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Okay, so is that the last speaker? If so?
There's a number of questions.
That's what I started to read, yeah. The question is the expenditure proposed in the Appropriation 2025-26 Bill 2025 Serial 25 stand as printed and that the report of the Estimates Committee be noted. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that the remainder of the bill and the Revenue Legislation Amendment Bill 2025 stands as printed. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that the bills be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Treasurer.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, I jumped the gun before. Madam Speaker, I move that the bills be now read a third time.
The question is the bills be now read a third time. All those in favour say aye. Against, no. I think the ayes have it. The clerk.
To authorise an amount to be paid from the Central Holding Authority for the financial year ending 30 June 2026. A bill for an act to amend the Gaming Control Act 1993, the Payroll Tax Act 2009, the Racing and Wagering Act 2024 and the Stamp Duty Act 1978.
Attorney General, Acting Leader of Government Business.
Madam Speaker, I move that the Assembly do now adjourn.
The question is that the Assembly now adjourn. Are there any speakers? Opposition Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd also like to point out some of the dire things for the Northern Territory in terms of the future of the economy under the CLP budget. And I know that the Treasurer in his wrap debate, Madam Speaker, spoke about the Friends of Carlin compound and that the CLP government is apparently still committed to the $3 million that they agreed to when they came to government, and that money would remain for the very important work that the Friends of Carlin Compound have done over many, many, many years to make sure that there is a memorial and that there is a place for people to go for healing and reflection when it comes to unfortunately remembering and hopefully never repeating the mistakes of the past, the traumatic and ongoing effects and impacts on Aboriginal Territorians with the systematic government institutional removal of Aboriginal children from their families here in the Northern Territory. Obviously, the rest of the country also experienced this as well under that horrific government policy, but making sure that we have a place of healing and reflection. And it was unfortunately me, Madam Speaker, who had to report to the Friends of Carlin Compound and deliver that very, very shocking news that the CLP government had removed the $3 million that was marked against that project, cashed up against that project, Madam Speaker, right here affecting the stolen generations here in Darwin and their representatives, because unfortunately there are many Aboriginal Territorians who are no longer with us who were impacted by the stolen generation. So on behalf of them and their representatives and the Friends of Carlin Compound, that the memorial site at Maley Point has been scrapped. The $3 million has been scrapped from the CLP's budget. I sent the transcript of the Estimates Committee to the Friends of Carlin Compound so they could see what the Treasurer as the Minister for Infrastructure's response was, and obviously they will likely do what they need to do with the information that has provided. So I think it's absolutely disingenuous, Madam Speaker, to hear the Treasurer saying, oh, I didn't scrap this and we're just going to reprioritise something for later on in later years with no definitive answer on when. Saying, oh, no, we will definitely do this. So I wouldn't believe the Treasurer, Madam Speaker, because before the August election, what we heard from the Treasurer, the member for Namatjira, Bill Yan, was that the CLP, if elected to government, would honour a $12 million commitment of grants for Aboriginal rangers over the next 4 years here in the Northern Territory. And we heard the Deputy Chief Minister, the member for Nelson, come in here and fob off any responsibility for the CLP's election commitment to Aboriginal rangers. Fobbed it off, oh, the federal government are the ones who pay for rangers. Yes, we know that. We've been advocating and supporting Aboriginal rangers in the Northern Territory for many, many years, member for Nelson. But, Madam Speaker, what he failed miserably in his contribution to this House in the wrap-up for estimates was to admit publicly, because none of them have had the guts to do it, Madam Speaker, to admit publicly that the CLP broke their election commitment, their election promise to fund the $12 million over 4 years for Aboriginal rangers in the Northern Territory. Now, Madam Speaker, it may not seem like a lot of money in the bigger scheme of things when you talk about government funding, but to each and every one of the 47 plus Aboriginal ranger groups in the Northern Territory who have applied for those grants in the past, who have benefited from those grants in the past, who absolutely support the ongoing commitment from the government of the day in the Northern Territory, they are deeply, deeply, deeply disappointed, Madam Speaker, as am I as a local member, but deeply disappointed that a government who promised to do something, who promised Territorians, if we become the government, we will put this $12 million of Ranger grant funding over 4 years into the Territory budget, and the very first CLP government budget, Madam Speaker, cuts it out completely. And it was only when the opposition asked the very question in those first weeks of the budget sittings in May, just a few weeks ago, Madam Speaker, feels like years ago now because it's been that terrible, those couple of weeks ago, and they fobbed it off. They didn't take responsibility. And Madam Speaker, I'll share one little learning that I've made. Well, I've got lots as when I was formerly a teacher, but particularly when I was a teacher and then becoming a local member, that even if people are not happy with your decision, you need to take accountability, you have to have ownership for that decision, and you need to tell people why you broke a promise or why you made a decision. And every single time we have asked the question, Madam Speaker, about this one issue, let alone many, many more issues, but this one very important issue for Territorians, an election commitment, something that the CLP promised they would do, and then in the first 10 months absolutely broke that promise, was to ask why and who made the decision. And it was all, oh no, you know, we've got these hard decisions. Right. Don't make an election commitment, because that's why people vote. They vote on decisions that they think you'll make when you're in government. They vote because you've told them to their face, in writing, in a press release, to a news article, in a radio interview, that that's what you will do when you become the government. Doesn't matter what government you are, CLP or Labor, that is what voters expect if you are getting their vote, or if you are promising, when we are in government, we will do this. And that is one fundamental failure of the CLP, is that they do not take accountability for the decisions that they are making. They are too scared to face the very people they're making decisions about and owning up to those decisions, that they have broken election promises. And that's what we have seen in the 2 weeks of estimates, Madam Speaker. We've heard some good stories, and I commend some of those good things that have happened, but the lack of accountability, the lack of responsibility, and the lack of ownership around the budget and the decisions that have been made, the election promises that have been broken, the commitments to Territorians that have absolutely been scrapped, is appalling. And you don't have to be the best or the worst government, but you do need to say what you said you will do. You do need to do what you promised Territorians you would do. You do need to do what you said that you would do when you became government. The solar feed-in tariffs today. Oh, we're going to double the feed-in tariff for the peak times, you know, that's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Actually, now we're in government, we've changed our mind, because even though we've got people's votes, we're actually now going to do it this way. Well, at least they got some type of commitment. They got a half-assed commitment for that. But they didn't give the commitment that they made to Territorians when they were in opposition, fighting for people's votes, saying, when we're in government, we will do this. They did not do that. And again, a disingenuous attempt by the CLP to scrounge back any type of accountability in that space. And they can rubbish Labor for the next 4 years, but while they're doing that, what are they actually doing for the Territory, Madam Speaker? What are they actually going to deliver for Territorians? What are they doing in the town centres? What are they doing in our regional centres? What are they doing in our remote communities? And what are they going to be doing in our homelands? Because right now, the very bleak and bitter reality for all of us, Madam Speaker, it doesn't matter where you live, is that we have a government who is more interested in chasing headlines, chasing the popular news story for a day or two, but no accountability or details on how they're going to deliver a new policy that they've just plucked out of the air. No accountability or responsibility or ownership on who, how and what is going to be paid for with these things that have been plucked out of the air, Madam Speaker. Some of the projects that we spoke about, and I heard the member for Katherine stand here and talk about education and making excuses, essentially, for $8.7 million ripped out of 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝘀𝙑𝘼𝙈 school. Her own colleague, the member for Berkeley, who unfortunately is unwell today and I'm sure would not be very happy with being spoken about his electorate in such a way. I really do hope that she's got more guts than the Treasurer, Madam Speaker, and that she does keep her commitment to the member for Berkeley and go out to 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝘀𝙑𝘼𝙈 community, to that school, and tell the community to their face why, and that she was the minister responsible, is the minister responsible, why they ripped $8.7 million of new classroom infrastructure out of the budget. It was in the previous budget, Madam Speaker. It was cashed up against the program, even though the Treasurer will fluff around and pretend that it wasn't, out of the budget. So then 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝘀𝙑𝘼𝙈 school will continually now miss out until maybe one of them decides, actually, let's do this. There's another election coming up. Let's just chuck some money there so we can try and deliver for the school. Absolutely appalling, and I will continue to hold the government to account, Madam Speaker.
Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank
there were some things I didn't get to say in my speech because I ran out of time, so I'd like to say them now. I'd just like to start off by saying, once again, which I've said in this House before, as an independent member and as a representative of the community, I am so tired of time being wasted by the two parties slagging each other off. It's a waste of time. It's not respectful to Territorians. I wish we could just move on from that. We're not in an election. We're here for people. Let's get on with what's in front of us and do it. I just want to go through some of the other things that I learnt in estimates for people who are listening who maybe they didn't get to hear. When asked about changes to the Anti-Discrimination Act, the Attorney-General said, "We are reigniting the flames of freedom." She likened offending an Aboriginal person or a gay and lesbian person to her being offended by a glass of water. The new bill focuses on inciting hatred, and when asked, the Attorney-General couldn't detail what that actually means. When the Attorney-General was asked, she said she consulted, or in fact in media, she said she consulted on proposed changes to the law, including with the Commissioner. These are the changes that she announced on the weekend that Darwin Pride celebrated 40 years. The Anti-Discrimination Commissioner, when asked what advice he had provided, said that he had advised the current version hold. It is the strongest piece of vilification law we have in Australia. There is no need for further amendments. Our recommendations were to retain the current version of Section 20A and not to revive or reenact Section 37A. It was good to hear the Minister commit to further consultation and listening to the community. The Attorney-General also confirmed that they removed $300,000 funding from the Anti-Discrimination Commission to conduct a racism review into police. I know in estimates last year there was a lot of discussion about racism reviews in various parts of the public service. It appears one of them may have happened, but it hasn't been released yet, and it doesn't seem to be that there's any progress anywhere else. When asked, the Attorney-General couldn't define 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝘀𝙑𝘍𝑃ACs, despite having introduced laws to imprison 10-year-old children. Just to make it clear, this legal principle is Latin for incapable of wrong and presumes that children under 14 don't fully understand the difference between right and wrong to have criminal intent. To be convicted of a crime in Australia, you need both a guilty act and a criminal intent, and children that young often do not have either. We heard that records on conflict of interest in Cabinet will be released in 30 years' time. That's in 2055, so don't hold your breath, everyone. The Attorney-General said that she stands by her statement that we are not worried about the trauma you may have by being in a watch house or a correctional facility. Attorney-General, many of those in custody are also victims. More than half of them haven't been sentenced yet. Isn't it your job to uphold the rights of all Territorians? I'm also so tired of hearing that it's mutually exclusive to care for victims and care for the rights of people in custody. It's not either or. I've got a long history of working with people who are victims of crime. I absolutely know that we need to do things to make sure that everyone's safe, but that doesn't mean that we need to cause harm to other people. The Northern Territory Government has previously restated its commitment to the Aboriginal Justice Agreement in this chamber, and that's welcomed. That includes reviewing recommendations from the various Royal Commissions, including the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody. That commission recommended that police should not investigate police deaths in custody. And when asked whether the government would honour that commitment and support an independent inquiry into Kumanjai White's death, the answer was no. The Minister for Health told us that the public system can handle a 10% increase in births after the closure of the private maternity services with existing staff and no extra funding. And I just want to note that I know we're all so grateful for our amazing public health system, and we know that every woman who goes to have a baby will be totally looked after appropriately. But where are the extra resources coming from? What other services will be stretched? You can't just keep adding pressure without a cost somewhere. The Minister for Health also told us we don't make decisions without professional clinical advice, which is a wonderful thing to hear. But when he asked if he sought such advice for the trial introduction of OC spray, the answer was no. We heard that every day 60 to 80 hospital beds are occupied by older people who aren't sick. They're just stuck in hospital because there's nowhere else for them to go. This is not their fault. It's a sign of a broken aged care system and a lack of community support services. Our elders deserve dignity, not hospital hallways. And just to be clear, many people contacted me about this afterwards, and they wanted to make sure that everyone's clear that those people are not there by choice and they're not there for free. They have to pay up to 97% of their pension. The Minister for Aboriginal Affairs said that it's very disappointing that the previous government failed to progress treaty. I'm disappointed too, Minister, as are so many people in the Northern Territory, and I'm further disappointed to hear you say that you will not be progressing treaty either. The Housing Minister told us that there are 283 vacant houses in the bush, and we're waiting to hear how many vacant houses there are in town. But we do know that there are 3,619 remote and 5,439 urban applications on the waiting list, and each of them representing not only an individual but a whole family. The average wait time for a house in every region is 8 to 10 years. That's kids spending their whole childhood waiting for a home. We've heard this before in the chamber, but the Minister for Prevention of Domestic Violence confirmed that $9.5 million has been cut from two women's frontline services, one of which the Catherine Women's Crisis Centre she hasn't even met with and did not know anything about that until they heard it in estimates. This is a budget where we're housing DV perpetrators in prison rather than victim survivors in refuges. We heard that there's 879 children in care and that this does not even take into account the more than 1,000 unallocated cases. And the Minister for Child Protection told us that she does not have the data on how many of these children have a care plan. And I want to note that I think the Minister was as disturbed by that as the rest of us. When asked, the Minister for Lands, Planning and Environment couldn't answer what his definition of climate change is and what causes it. We were told once again in relation to conflict of interest in the public sector that it's managed through a conflict of interest register. And we were told once again that no, we can't see it. No one is asking for personal details like where someone's children go to swimming lessons. What people want to know is whether private interests are influencing public decisions. That's a reasonable expectation in any democracy. So, Madam Speaker, thank you for allowing me to finish that speech. I just want to say that once again, as an independent, as someone committed to representing both my community of Johnston and the interests of people beyond that in this chamber where we're making laws, I thank people who come to these processes with that broad interest, the interest of the whole territory at heart. I know all of us are here to try and make things better. I really look forward to a future where we can put aside the political point scoring. I'm saying this to both parties, where we can put aside the sniping, where we can put aside saying you did this, you did that, and actually get on with the job of making this the place it could be. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are there any more speakers? No. Are there any more speakers? No. Okay. The question is that correct? Okay. I'm getting mixed messages here. The question is that the Assembly adjourn. Those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary no. I think the ayes have it. The Assembly stands adjourned until 10 a.m. on Tuesday the 29th of July 2025 or such other time and or date as may be advised pursuant to standing orders. Good night, everyone.